Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I am your host, John DeLynn. It is October 1st, 2021, and I am so thrilled to be joined in my studio again, just like last week, by my dear friend, Mindy Caldwell. Hey, Mindy.
Hi, John.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
So good to have you.
Thank you. So fun to be here.
For those of you who weren't able to join us last week, we did a full 3 hours on the Mormon influence on Chad and Lori Daybell. Again, for those of you who haven't been following this story in the news, there is a whole very significant global news story about the murder of several people, several adults and children, that we'll be providing a quick overview about today. But it involves two important suspects, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, both of whom were active and believing members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormon Church. And the whole purpose of this 2 or potentially 3-part series is to address the question of whether or not there were these just murders that would have happened anywhere under any cultural or religious context, or is it possible that beliefs and or doctrines and or practices and or cultural dynamics within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints of the Mormon Church were important factors in the events that lead up to these murders? And we are doing part 2 of this series today, and we are so thrilled to have with us Dr. John and Lauren from Hidden a True Crime podcast. They are joining us again. They're back, and they have an amazing YouTube channel, and they're really deep into this story. And we're just so thrilled to have them back to help tell the rest of the story. Lauren, why don't we begin with you? Welcome back to Mormon Stories Podcast, Lauren. And why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself again for those who are joining us for the first time?
Thank you, John. Yeah, my name is Lauren, as you said, and I used to be a TV reporter for 10 years. I worked with ABC, NBC, and Fox local affiliates in Salt Lake City and East Idaho and Boise. So that's my work experience, and the journalist in me just couldn't leave. And so once I retired, when my son was a year old, we started a podcast where I can continue being a journalist. And I have delved into this case fully for the past, since December of 2019, I have been invested.
Yeah. Tell us about your podcast, your YouTube channel podcast, really quick.
Our podcast is Hidden a True Crime Podcast. It's on all platforms. And our YouTube channel is Hidden True Crime. We started the podcast because I'll let my co-host and husband introduce himself, but Dr. John is a forensic psychologist, and we wanted to understand the why. And we wanted to understand the why because I kept asking the why to my husband, to John. I kept saying, why, how?
Why, what?
Delve into the hidden motives. So hidden is the hidden motives, not just sex, love, money, not the Dateline motives, but the actual hidden motives of how two people could then do something so horrendous and create such havoc. And that is what our podcast tackles.
I love it.
Great.
Welcome back, Lauren. It's great to have you. And Dr. John, tell us a bit about your awesome background and why you care about this case.
My name is Dr. John Matthias. I am a clinical and forensic psychologist. I've been doing forensic work for over 20 years now. I've done hundreds of forensic evaluations over the years, assessing sex offenders and violence and murders. And more recently, I've been doing a lot of expert witness work. But why were we interested in this case? I think this case had so many elements and so many variables that were really challenging, and that people were very confused by. And so I think we thought maybe we could illuminate some of the pieces of the puzzle and help make sense of it. And I feel like all of my training kind of led me to this point, right? This is like the Mount Everest of forensic work. So it was a challenge for me, and and Lauren, I think, and we wanted to take it on. And with the quarantine during the pandemic, we actually had the time. So we talked about a podcast for many years, but we never actually did it because we were so busy with other projects. And prisons and jails shut down in the spring of 2020 because of the pandemic. So I literally didn't have work for months, and we finally had this window to do this podcast. So we were really thrilled to take it on. And I joked with Lauren. I said, if my mom listens and we have one listener, I'll be content. But we've grown beyond that, and we're grateful for that. And I'm very humbled by this whole experience. And we're very happy to be here with you, John and Mindy. Thank you for having us.
One thing I want to mention too really quickly is through the process, we've gotten to know a lot of the victims who are still alive, and it's become really personal to us now. It's something that started us wanting to understand the whys, and now it's something that we're really passionate about. We are friends with the victims. We talk to the victims, and we care, and we hope that we can bring awareness to this and stop something like this from ever happening again, because we both acknowledge that this could happen again.
There's still elements of these groups that continue to this day, and we're obviously concerned about that. But yeah, it did become, thanks for mentioning that, Lauren, it did become very personal. We never anticipated that our have brought enough appeal so that some of the major players and families would contact us and reach out to us and want to provide information and be a part of it. So we were really a little bit surprised by that and grateful too. So it allowed us to really get, to do a deep dive into this case and get some really outstanding information that many other people were not getting.
We thank you both. And Mindy, maybe if you don't mind, it's such a treat to have you here. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself just really quickly again for those who are joining us for the first time?
Sure. My name is Mindy Caldwell. I am a good friend of John and Margie, and at some point I mentioned to John how interested I was in this case, not only because I just find true crime fascinating, but because this case is unique and has obviously the Mormon element, and I also have I have a little bit of a family history of family members who were very involved in this kind of end times prepper movement, to the tune of investing a lot of money and causing some strain in some relationships over this involvement. And so this case has been interesting for me in that way. And also, I'm a mom, and I have several children, and I've just felt so tender about this case, and about JJ and Tylee and all of the victims, Tammy and Charles, and it's been such an interesting and sad and fascinating case, and I just haven't been able to look away. So here I am.
And of course, we talked about the Caldwell takeover of Mormon Stories podcast.
Yeah.
Your husband Steve came on Mormon Stories a few weeks ago to talk about the vaccine.
That's right.
And Shannon Caldwell Montez
Yes.
is Steve's sister, and of course, she did that incredible series on B.H.
Which we
Roberts.
shared with John.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're like, you
Yeah.
have to read this.
Yeah.
Not so much that she's our sister-in-law, because it's really good. It's important. So I'm glad.
I love it.
Thank
Well,
you.
welcome, Mindy. It's great to have
Thank you.
Really quickly, I think we ended last episode by talking about, by naming the victims, the actual murder victims. Why don't we start by naming them, just so that and we'll come back and we'll end by talking about them as well. But should we just name the victim?
When she was murdered, and JJ was just 7 years old when he was murdered, and they were brother and sister. They were Lori Vallow Daybell's children. In addition to these two lives lost, Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy Daybell, died in October, shortly after the children died. And Chad Daybell has been charged in her murder. And then Charles Vallow, who lived in Arizona, so separate state, that was Lori's husband before Chad. and he was shot multiple times in a so-and-so self-defense, but recently Lori Vallow has been charged in his murder as well. So that's just the beginning, and then there are questions of other people.
Chad's, did you mention Chad's wife, Tammy?
Chad's wife, Tammy, yes.
Okay.
Mentioned her, and he's been charged in her murder.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. All right. Well, it's always tricky to follow these crimes because they're so fascinating, but
Right.
you don't want to get all giddy and about the joy of the fact that actually people have been killed, and
It's
Yeah.
real, right? Real lives and real victims,
Yeah.
right?
So
Absolutely. That's
I
important.
like,
And we have our bracelets on today too. Justice for JJ and Tylee.
so really quickly, thank you, Lauren. All right, so just to do like a 30-second recap, last week we talked about what we felt are the Christian foundations for everything that's happened, including a belief in God and Jesus and the second coming and the 144,000, and a belief in spirits and souls and devils and demonic possession, prayer, heaven, prophets, spiritual gifts. All of this is Christian doctrine that underlies this case. And of course, we talked about various Mormon beliefs that heavily belie this case as well, including an emphasis on personal revelation, an extra emphasis on the second coming, the prepper movement that was rooted in food storage. There are even scriptures in Mormonism about one mighty and strong, or a Davidic servant that will come back and usher in Jesus's return right before the second coming. The Mormon plan of salvation that teaches about past lives and future lives. We'll be talking about that today, as well as this notion of the veil, or the veil of forgetfulness, where a veil was put up to help us forget our past life, or to keep us from seeing into the future lives. Spiritual gifts, even the use of like magic relics, like Joseph Smith's use of a stone in a hat to translate the Book of Mormon. And then, of course, we have, blessings and healings and special spiritual powers, and even women who feel like they maybe have lost their spiritual powers. And then, of course, just a really important de-emphasis on science and evidence and critical thinking skills, heavy sexual shame, the teachings of polygamy and polyandry, which are going to weigh into today's episode, that come from Joseph Smith himself, along with the teachings of celestial sealings and eternal marriage, becoming gods and goddesses. All of that is very Mormon, along with a strong conservative Republican Mormon culture in in rural Utah and Idaho, and specifically eastern Idaho. We talked last week about Denver Snuffer, near-death experiences, and Julie Rowe. I called it neo-Mormon fundamentalism. It's not quite Warren Jeff's Mormon fundamentalism, but there's a emerging internet-based neo-Mormon fundamentalism that is rooted in prophecies and near-death experiences. And just as you mentioned, Mindy, kind of this sense for more Orthodox Mormons that they're just getting milk all the time. They're not getting enough spiritual meat, and that they need more spiritual sustenance, which makes them become seekers. We also talked about, let's see, so many video clips we showed, but we talked about Julie Rowe. We talked about Chad Daybell. We talked about him becoming an author and going into book publishing. And then we talked about the prepper movement and a vow and the preparing of people. So that's kind of a quick overview of what we talked about. We really do recommend that you guys go back and watch that. And what we're going to begin with today is a disclaimer. And maybe Dr. John, you might feel comfortable providing a quick disclaimer before we jump in.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it's important to say, we didn't really say it last episode strongly enough, but that it's important to remember that Chad and Lori are innocent until proven guilty. So this case has not been adjudicated. Sometimes I think, because the evidence is overwhelming, we make a lot of assumptions, but Chad and Lori both will have their day in court, and the case eventually will be adjudicated and tried. And so, as strong as our opinions may be, the fact is that at the moment that they're innocent until proven guilty. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. And with that in mind, I think there's another disclaimer, which is that this is speculative. So we're developing theories of the case, or at least I am. And I want to say it's very educational. It's more educational than otherwise, I think, than we're trying to provide information. We're not trying to make judgments. We're not trying to prejudge the situation, but we're looking at the evidence, and certainly we're making assumptions, but we're speculating, and we're hoping to educate people.
I love it.
Very good.
Okay, well, I think the first place to begin today's episode, and by the way, if you guys are viewers or listeners, sometimes people love the introductions and the beginning parts, and some people just want to skip to either just getting into the meat of things or just jump to different parts of the episode. I want to make sure people understand that if you consume our podcast on YouTube, what we try and always do within a day or two of releasing the episode is provide time code stamps where you can literally, if you want to just skip all that intro and jump to part one, you can click on the time code that jumps you there, and you can actually read the different parts that we ended up discussing on the video and jump to the parts you want to jump to. And if you're a podcast listener, you can always buy YouTube Premium, which I think is like $10 a month. That takes out all the ads, and it makes it so you can listen on YouTube and even have your screen turned off. And I think that's the way I consume a lot of content these days. So point. I just wanted to kind of make people aware that both the time codes are available to jump to where they want to go, and that consuming podcasts through YouTube, even if you just listen in audio, YouTube is becoming a great way to consume. But we also want to make this friendly to our audio only listeners, because that's the bulk of our audience. Okay, so let's begin. We introduced Chad and Julie, and I think the next step is to talk about Chad hooking up with Julie and Chad becoming her publisher. And we've got a couple videos queued, but Lauren and Dr. John, where should we begin the story?
I think that this is important. I think that when Chad and Julie connected, it was huge. We even received an email just last week that said that once Chad became Julie Rowe's publisher, he was able to take all his children to a restaurant for the first time, or they were excited about being able to go to a restaurant. Someone wrote us who knows the Daybells and a lot of the other players, and she said that was something the children were thrilled about. So Julie made a big difference in Chad's financial life, as well as some other things that we'll learn about. Dr. John, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I think this is a pivotal moment, and the more we learn about this case, the more important Julie Rowe's influence is, I think, in the sense that she really paved the way for Chad to begin kind of reinventing his past in terms of the near-death experiences. He really hadn't talked about near-death experiences until after Julie Rowe. So he saw how successful she was with the book on near-death experiences. He saw the importance of that. He saw the authority it provided to her. And I think he sort of engaged in some revisionist history that allowed him to then claim some of these past incidents were near-death experiences.
One of the things I love about your YouTube channel, Hidden a True Crime Podcast, and your podcast, is that you mentioned, and I think we talked about this last week, you mentioned Chad's longtime career as literally a grave digger, where he was digging graves and burying dead bodies. Clearly that's relevant, at least for two reasons. One is this very close direct association with death over a long period of time and dealing with bodies, but also just shows how poor and sort of unremarkable maybe his life had turned out to be, which then when the money and the fame starts coming, certainly he doesn't want to let that go. Is that, Dr. John, what do you think about that?
Yeah, those are, thank you for summarizing it. Those are great insights. And I would take it a step further and say there's a theory that's in social psychology called terror management theory, which we talk about on the podcast. But the basic idea is that death anxiety drives us to more extreme behaviors. And since Chad was around death all the time, I believe quite strongly that those experiences, as you mentioned, John, tended to lead to more extreme beliefs. So this wasn't something that was conscious. He wasn't consciously doing this, but the fact that he was around death all the time, I think, really kind of ramped up his beliefs in a more extreme direction. And it gave, he became more invested, I think, in his writings and his beliefs and his visions for the future. In addition to what you just said, that I think you're right. I think that there were some midlife issues, midlife crises going on, and working in a cemetery certainly wasn't what he envisioned for his life. He didn't feel particularly successful, I'm sure, although I'm not sure he would admit that. But absolutely, it was a stark contrast, I think, to this vision he had of being really influential in the Mormon world and writing books that were taken seriously by the church. None of which was happening. He never became a bishop, which I'm sure was really disappointing to him in Springville. So I think there were a lot of failures that were going on behind the scenes that kind of underlay his work in a cemetery. That, as you said, John, kind of created this the sense of failure and this midlife crisis.
Love it. Okay, so Julie had these books. She kind of got this reputation of being an energy healer. She publishes some books about near-death experiences and her ability to prophesy and forecast, natural disasters and things in the future, kind of end times prophecies by a Mormon woman. Chad hooks up with her as her publisher. Is there anything else we should say to set this up before we play a few of these clips?
I say we play them.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go for it.
So here's the first clip that is kind of interesting. It's basically Eric Smith, which is Mindy, do you want to introduce Eric Smith?
Yeah, maybe we should introduce Eric Smith.
Before we get into that.
So Lauren, do you want to go
ahead,
first? And then Mindy can fill in her impressions of Eric? Because
Absolutely. I first learned about Eric Smith in December of 2019 when there was a podcast. He and Julie Rowe had a podcast together, and they did a podcast in December of 2019, right after the story broke. And the only thing we knew at the beginning was 2 missing children, a Deseret book author, and a once primary president are being looked at, and there are 2 missing children, and what in the world? And so right after that story broke, it was the day after Christmas 2019, Eric Smith and Julie Rowe jump on a podcast and announce that, essentially Julie announces that Chad is innocent and she knows his heart. And I have been so intrigued with Eric Smith ever since. And they did these podcasts together. It's called Eyes Wide Open. And since that time, I have interviewed other people that knew Eric Smith and Julie Rowe. I learned just how tight-knit this group was. And Eric even allowed me to interview him, which I know we'll get into later. But Eric Smith is somebody that is a big believer in Julie Rowe, a big person in the prepper movement in East Idaho, and someone that started, and he's essentially the belief of multiple probations or reincarnation.
Anything else you want to add about why Eric's interesting?
I think that covers it.
Okay.
I found it fascinating that I hadn't really heard of him, but he's a pretty major player in this movement and this development of this kind of theology that Chad adopts and runs with.
He's a very major player.
Yes.
All right. So this is a clip of Eric Smith talking about Chad's gifts. For me, it was one of the most powerful and impactful parts of this entire interview. I think I want to do a reaction video with Mindy as maybe a part 3 to the series, where we just play this amazing 2-hour interview that you Lauren did with Eric Smith, because to me it really explains Joseph Smith. If you look at Eric Smith's beliefs in Chad Daybell's powers, it explains how people could believe in Joseph Smith even after he never found any treasure, even after the polygamy, even after all the problems. You've still got all these people believing in Joseph Smith after the Kirtland Bank scandal.
Mhm.
How can you still believe in someone when there's so many problems? This is Eric Smith talking about his continued belief in Chad's powers after Chad is
Potentially.
now
Mhm.
in prison for accused murder, right?
Right.
And so this is Eric reflecting on his belief in Chad's gifts. All right. And I'm going to just ask Lauren, Dr. John, and Mindy, you guys tell me to stop the video when you think we've seen enough, because you guys know this video better than me. Is that okay? Okay. So this is Eric Smith reflecting on Chad Daybell's gifts.
So he's became so curious, and I think he did recognize, and I'll be honest, I think he does. Chad is gifted. There is no denying it. Okay. And anybody who says otherwise is probably not being truthful with themselves. People are spiritually gifted. I believe all of us have spiritual gifts, and a lot of people are empathic and can read people's energy and hearts. And, Chad had some of that. Chad
How was he gifted? How was he gifted?
Well, he had a thin veil. He could see and discern things on the other side of the veil. He could see energies. The thing that I've learned, and I've been around a lot of, say, gifted people in this way, in the visionary aspect, knowing, discerning things on the other side of the veil. Julie has exceptional gifts. And then I've met several others that are the same, that are visionary, see things, discern things on the other side of the veil, see spirits, talk to spirits, feel their energy, even smell them. Their senses are just different than most of us. And I'm totally comfortable with that. The thing that I learned is that with these folks,
okay, and I'm hoping that the audience could hear that video. Okay,
we could hear it. I could hear that. Great.
Great. So Lauren and Dr. John and Mindy, what do you guys reflect on what we just heard about Eric Smith's belief in Chad Daybell's powers?
When interviewing him, I was surprised when he said that, which is why I think I interrupted him and said, what are his powers? I wanted to really understand what he was sharing with me. And when he said he can see beyond the veil, that's exactly what Chad's always claimed he can do. And it was surprising for me to hear that after they've been charged with these deaths. Like, let's put that into perspective. And Eric believes that Chad did it. So put that in perspective too. Eric believes that Chad is responsible, that his ego got in the way, and Chad has been charged officially by law enforcement in this crime. And he's saying that no, he can see beyond the veil. The issue is ego, but that doesn't mean his gifts aren't real. That was surprising for me to hear.
And I just, I have to jump in here. My role in this whole episode is kind of making the connections that I can make between this story and Mormonism. And if you study the life of Joseph Smith, one of the things apologists say when they're, if you mention that Joseph Smith took people on treasure digs with a stone in a hat, but never found any treasure. If you mention the Kirtland Bank scandal, if you mention the polygamy, the 30, 40 wives, hiding it from Emma, all the deception, and then his martyrdom, when you mention that to Mormon apologists, what they say is, well, how do you explain that so many people still believed in Joseph Smith, even after he was, put in, persecuted for treasure digging? They still believed that he had the power to treasure dig. Even after his martyrdom, look at, 16 million people, they will say, still believe in Joseph Smith. That's evidence that Joseph Smith was still a prophet, because how else could so many people believe in him? Well, you don't have to just go to, David Koresh or Jim Jones or, any modern cult leader to realize that lots of people still believe in lots of cult leaders in spite of the horrendous things you do. You could also go to Eric Smith and Chad Daybell, and I'm kind of beating a dead horse here. Even after Chad Daybell had murdered people, Eric Smith is still believing that he had the gifts and powers of God.
And not just that, but if we deny it, then we're not being honest with ourselves. That segment of the interview was just kind of made me sick to my stomach, because like you say, this is way after the discovery of those children, and all the things are coming together, and Eric is very aware of the witness, or of the evidence that looks very favorably towards Chad, and is still, I just felt like there was a void of feeling or emotion for the victims, and he still was trying to press home this idea that Chad and Julie still have these tremendous gifts. So it's powerful that they have that mind frame, for sure.
I want to say this too, in this, as you point out, it's a 2-hour interview, and some people I see, probably wanted you to keep playing the part you were playing. I apologize. But Eric did show some humility too. I brought up this 2019 podcast with him where Julie was stating that, he was innocent, and Eric admitted, I wanted to believe he was innocent and I was wrong. So Eric was showing some bits of, I should have seen it differently back then. And yet even then he's like, no, Chad is gifted though. He does see beyond the veil. That I'm not gonna maybe waver from at all.
Mm.
So I thought that was interesting too.
Yes.
I want to thank our viewer, Sean Bennington. I think I said Chad murdered
Yes.
people, and Sean says allegedly murdered people.
Allegedly, yes.
And
That's
we
important.
thank you, listeners and viewers, for those corrections. Allegedly, yeah. John.
Yeah, let me just weigh in a little bit on this issue too. I think I kind of agree with you here, John, in terms of the issue to me is how do human beings evaluate evidence? How is it possible that someone can evaluate the evidence here in the way that Eric Smith does after, Chad and Julie, for example, made a number of prophecies. Not a single one of those prophecies have come true.
Not one.
How do you give somebody credibility when in 2015, Julie was talking about the Wasatch earthquakes repeatedly and how horrible it was going to be, and none of it came true. You would think at that point there might be a max exodus from her movement, right? But no, she grew. And, I think people filter information through their beliefs, through their worldviews. And if their worldviews are strong and extreme, it's unlikely they're going to change that. And also we know that in terms of conspiracies, for example, if you take the QAnon conspiracy, we know that the two biggest elements in terms of getting people on board with conspiracies are fear and uncertainty. Mm-hmm. So you have to think that to some degree, the followers of these folks were influenced by a certain amount of fear and uncertainty, that if there's uncertainty in the world, they want to correct that. They want to amend it and make sure that their views are correct. And so I think some of those elements are driving this, but it really is a fascinating look at how we evaluate evidence one way or the other, and how we're willing to stick to evidence that clearly is wrong or false.
I got an interesting comment from Tina on YouTube. She writes, if someone has spiritual gifts and does horrible things, that is bad, really bad. And what I'm reading from Tina's comment is what is the common response to both Julie Rowe, which we're going to get into later, and Chad Daybell and Joseph Smith, frankly, which is, well, someone can still have spiritual gifts and then make mistakes later, but that doesn't take away the fact that they have spiritual gifts. And I just, and this is true, Orthodox or mainstream members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will make the same argument that, well, prophets, seers, and revelators can still be prophets, but then get something wrong, like blacks in the priesthood or polygamy. Right. But it really does beg the question: what's the value of a prophet or a seer or revelator,
or a visionary?
If you can flip a coin as to their reliability, and if they get it right, well, then they're a prophet. But if they get it wrong, well, then they're human. It just starts the question of how much reliability really is there and what's their value, because I could get it wrong or get it right 50 or 40% of the time, and or a primate could. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump, if it's okay, to the next little video, which is Julie talking about her relationship with Chad and kind of how they hooked up. And then I want you guys to kind of paint the picture of what it was like at these conferences, these preparing of people conferences, in terms of like Julie and Chad and books and money and presentations, and how that led to Julie's energy work, and then what was kind of going on behind the scenes of how Chad and Julie's relationship grew. But we'll start with just Julie describing her union with Chad.
Travels the country to do
headlines around the world. Gretchen?
Well, Mark, Rose says she was really good friends with Chad and Chad's late wife, Tammy, who died back in October. But since all of these deaths connected to the case have come to light, she says her former friend isn't the man she thought he was. Julie Rowe lives in Kansas, but she travels the country to do what she calls spiritual and energy readings. Like Chad, Julie says she's had near-death experiences and writes about them. That's how she met Chad several years ago.
He was my publisher for my first 4 books.
Rose says she also became close friends with Chad, his late wife Tammy, and their children.
I did energy sessions for he and some of his kids.
Rose says that Chad often spoke with her about his visions of Tammy dying.
He really felt like she was going to pass away last fall, between like October and December.
And told her that the two were having problems.
He had told me in February, one of the other things he put in the text was that he and Tammy were tight on money and he was doing his best to keep his marriage together.
Rose says her relationship with Chad soured last year over publishing rights. Chad cut off all communication with her, but she remained close with his kids. And when Tammy died in October of 2019, Rose says the couple's daughter, Emma, called her.
Emma answered her phone and she was sobbing. And we had a 40-minute conversation. I believe that he has done some brainwashing with them. I believe he's still using them.
Rose says she never met Lori or Lori's children, JJ and Tylee, but believes it's incredibly selfish how Chad and his new wife have been acting.
Chad's kids were left for the holidays after their mom just died, with their dad taken off to Hawaii with another woman. They have to see pictures of him getting married on the beach, holding hands, while they're stuck in Idaho with the FBI raiding them and police storming their houses and their records and their personal lives. And he's MIA in Hawaii.
I think that gives a pretty decent sense for their relationship. But Lauren and Dr. John, what did this union of Julie and Chad mean in terms of not just their individual lives, but then what it contributed to the growing movement of preppers, but then also what came after that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you want to start, Dr. John, or do you want?
Maybe you can take that.
Okay.
So
Well,
it's
I
a bunch
think
of preppers. It's a bunch of Mormon preppers
Right.
that are thinking about the end times and buying ammo and buying food and buying MREs and tents. We've got that foundation of a bunch of Mormon preppers. What does Chad and Julie entering the mix do in the movement and to their individual lives? That's the question.
Okay. Well, one thing that Eric Smith brought up in the interview with me was these 3 different tiers. Can I begin there a little bit? Does that work?
Yes.
Sure.
So he explained that the tier 1 is Mormonism, mainstream Mormonism. Tier 2 is where Eric took it. He believes in multiple probations, reincarnation, which he considers a beautiful belief system in the hereafter, as well as a few other things. Tier 3 is where he mentions thank you. He mentions zombies are tier 3. This is Chad. This is what Eric Smith is claiming Chad's belief system is: justifying infidelity, prophesying murders, evil, dark, a rating system. But I want to say, and then Eric Smith, who is a believer in Julie Rowe and was good friends with Julie Rowe, did this podcast with Julie Rowe. In fact, there was a picture of Chad and Julie in that newscast that you showed there with her mouth open. They cut off Eric Smith on the left side. So Eric Smith is saying that this was Chad's, but I have to say, no, this was Chad and Julie's. Chad and Julie went house to house with a pendulum, telling people who they were in past lives, rating people light and dark. They would correlate with each other on their spiritual gifts. They both could see beyond the veil. Chad's veil was ripped, and so Julie's was fully open. So hear things and confirm things. And when I see tier 3, I just want to say I see Julie Rowe in every one of those things, in my opinion. And I just think it took this prepper movement to a whole new level. In addition to this, they're still doing the prepping movement. Julie is asking people to deed their property to her for her nonprofit. She's having 2,000 of people come to the, tabernacle in Rexburg to hear her speak, getting people's, taking people's life savings from them. We know of 3 people that were requested to deed their property to her cause. And so in addition to this, we're getting into these, we can see whether people are light or dark. We know who you were in a past life, and multiple probation. So, and Chad has more money, I think, at this point too, than he's ever had to. So throw that, tangible thing in too.
So let me see if I can summarize. So we've got all these preppers, largely in like Eastern Idaho, Rexburg, but also in Draper and in
Arizona.
Sandy and in Arizona. They're all into prepping. But then when in these prepper conferences, Chad and Julie are showing up, selling books, speaking, they start to become kind of celebrities within the prepper movement.
Yes.
And then
Yes,
because then they can sell their energy work, or they can have private get-togethers, which you talk a lot, people that you interview on your YouTube channel / podcast start talking about this. Chad and Julie start meeting individually in these small groups,
Right.
both in Idaho and in Utah and in Arizona. And they start talking about their longing for more advanced Mormon doctrine. So yes, Mormon theology. Yes, Mormon theology. We all have spirits. Yes, we had a previous life and we have an afterlife. But that's kind of milk. That's just boring. Like
boring.
We learned that in elementary school. We learned that in primary.
Right.
They want the meat. And so Eric starts developing this, what we're calling second and third tier theology, which is that number one, it's marrying this idea of reincarnation with Mormonism. He doesn't like the term reincarnation just because it has negative connotations, but it's this idea that not only are we currently living as spirits, but we lived in previous lives as different spirits. So maybe I was Napoleon Bonaparte, or maybe you were
Joan of Arc.
Joan of Arc, right?
Yeah.
And
But neither of you were a slave, just so you know.
No, that's a
no
point
servants in this group.
We've laughed so hard about this, about this, when this multiple probation movement, when they started talking about this, it was very interesting what they were telling people that they were or who they were telling people that they were in previous probations. And it's almost always, it seemed to be really important, biblical. I think that
Isaiah
and
Joan of Arc.
Yes, like really important.
Henry VIII.
Yes, people in history and biblical and Book of Mormon, very important people.
Samuel the Lamanite,
Samuel
right?
the Lamanite, and Alex Cox, who also passed away. He's another death in this saga.
That's Julie's
another.
It's Lori's brother. Lori's brother. He was told by Chad Daybell that he was the angel that came to Nephi in the Book of Mormon, who protected Nephi when Nephi was getting beat up by his brothers. And so he kind of took on that role. So it's just another illustration of how it was all important people. And we laugh, like, it just how convenient that all of these important,
all these Rexburg,
really important people came back as like middle-aged white guys
in Rexburg.
All these Rexburg, preppers, all of a sudden are some of the most important people in history.
Right.
So if you take Eric's beliefs of multiple probations, and then this idea of spiritual gifts with people like Chad and Julie claiming to have spiritual gifts, they're the ones and others going around to people's homes, telling them, like almost like a patriarchal blessing,
right,
who they were in former lives. So that's kind of one important theological development, which then leads to this idea that people like Chad or Julie have the ability to see whether someone's spirit is either light or good or evil and dark. And can someone explain if a spirit is evil and dark, what that means. What does that mean?
Dr. John, take that one away. He loves Chad's rating system. What that means.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways to interpret that, I guess. From a psychological standpoint, which is where I'm always going to begin, it's about power. If you have the ability to judge someone light or dark, then you have power over them. So when you combine all the things you're just talking about, John, and Mindy, the multiple probations and all this other stuff, and you combine it with the light and dark system, you're putting yourself in a position of authority, of power to really take control of a situation and to judge people and to separate them into basically good and bad.
Yeah.
And Chad and Julie both did that.
And theologically, if somebody, okay, we all have spirits, right? If somebody is evil or dark, what does that mean in terms of what's happened with their spirit? Does that mean that they've been possessed by evil spirits? And then is that how the zombie thing comes in? Because at some point their actual spirit has left their body, and so evil spirits have taken over their body, and that's what a zombie is. Tell us about how evil and dark connects to zombies. And let's not introduce Lori yet or kids, but just talk about the concept.
Well, you're in luck because Chad Daybell left us a lot of information on how his rating system worked. He explained that if he uses a decimal point system as well, you're usually like a 5.1. Yeah, 5.1, 2.1. He'll tell you how dark or how light you are to a very specific decimal point system. He explains that there's a light or dark system. If you are dark, but you're not too dark, you can kind of come back from that and maybe become light. If you hit up another multiple probation or something, you've got a chance. He's telling you there's a chance for you. But if you are really, really dark, I think it's like 4.1 and beyond, then there's no coming back. You're pretty much screwed. And
does that mean your spirit's bad or that your spirit's been replaced? Do we know?
Well, I know that.
I mean, it's confusing how it goes from possession to zombies. What we do know is that they talked about the idea of 20,000 zombies being present in the United States that needed to be eliminated. So somehow this idea of zombies is important because it's part of their calling or their mission to eliminate zombies. And we know that there was a lot of discussion that the number was around 20,000. So that actually raises the question of whether, of to what extent, how far could this go? To what extent were many people in danger, right? I mean, we don't know because they ended it fairly quickly after everybody that was murdered was considered a zombie or alleged to be murdered. Let's say that. But we don't know, based on this idea of many, many thousands of zombies, we don't know where this could have gone. We've talked to people that are close to this movement and they say he would have kept going. There would have been many, many more murders.
I want to say this too, because a lot of people claim that the zombie thing came out of nowhere and it was right before the murders and zombies is crazy. I don't know where this term came from. First off, the term zombie has been around for a while. There are comments on a vow that we talked about in our last podcast episode. This is a prepping website with its headquarters out of Rexburg, run by Christopher Parrott. And Chad is commenting. We have screenshots.
Keep going. Sorry.
Oh yeah, we have screenshots of comments he made on the Avow site, and he's asking Christopher Parrott. So when these zombies come in from liberal Idaho Falls, that's what he was referring to. The liberals start coming towards Rexburg from Idaho Falls. Do we just shoot them? What do we do? And nobody's
the liberals in Idaho Falls.
Yes.
Because there's a college like Idaho State University is there or something. Like, what is that, Pocatello? I forget.
No, Pocatello. Yeah, but no, exactly. It's I know that comment's mind blowing on so many levels, but he's referring to shooting zombies, And essentially zombies are what is possession, in what some people believe is a possession, according to Eric Smith, where an evil spirit enters a good spirit. So it's even beyond rating you as a spirit or how evil, and there's the rating system, how light or dark are you, but there's the idea that your spirit, you could have even been a great spirit, you could have been a top spirit, the most light of light, good spirit there is, but that doesn't mean that evil spirit can't enter you somehow, and then we've just got to maybe get rid of you and shoot you before you get to Rexburg.
It can enter you if Chad Daybell says it's entered you.
Yes.
I also want to bring up this book one more time because I'm learning how important it is. You've brought up Denver Snuffer, who is so important. And Mindy brought this book up last time. And a lot of people now have said it's by John Matthias, who's now deceased. He died just after publishing this book. He tells a near-death experience of a man who goes by the name of Spencer. And in it, it talks about possession. It talks about portals. Mm-hmm. And Chad Daybell mentions this book. Laurie Daybell, Vallow Daybell loved this book. And I think that this book is important too. And if you want to understand zombies and the rating system, maybe, head to your local library. Let's hope it's not there, but you can check this out.
I was just going to say that book, the reason I mentioned it last time is in my personal experience with this movement and with family members, that book was extremely influential. It was gifted to me actually by my family member. So
yeah. So Zombies is not just like out of the blue a month before the murders by Chad Daybell. It still exists, this idea.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, well, what we're trying to do is paint the picture. So because of these prepper events, because Chad and Julie becoming celebrities, they're starting these little small groups where they're going around all over the country and meeting with these small groups. And I'm going to share one comment from a viewer. Smilezim says, I was a part of those prepping groups and ate it all up. I was a true believing Mormon back then. I was ashamed at how I ate it up. Now that I'm out of the church, I can now see how easy it was to fall into the BS. And that's the point we're making. Isn't just that Chad and Julie developed some weird beliefs. It's that they had, because of these events in their books, had these massive followings like Denver Snuffer, where they had thousands and thousands of people all over the Mormon church believing that Chad and Julie and even others had these special powers. And I think it's okay if we just play a quick clip that ties back to Joseph Smith. It's basically of Chad, using a pendulum.
We have to talk about the pendulum really fast.
Okay. Do you want to introduce it, Mindy? Introduce the pendulum.
Can I get this? Can I do this one, guys? So Chad comes across a necklace, I believe, in a LDS chapel. Correct, Lauren?
Correct. While he's cleaning the chapel.
While he's cleaning, some young woman or mom lost her necklace at the church. Chad finds a necklace, and he claims that the spirit told him that it had special powers just for him, and then he subsequently used that necklace throughout the rest of his of this practice of like using it to gauge people's lightness and darkness and their the premortal probation, those types of things. So yeah, it was a pretty special necklace that somebody's missing.
And where would Chad get the idea that objects can have special powers?
Well, magical thinking has roots in the very origins of the LDS Church. So.
And a really good book on that
objects.
is Michael Quinn's Early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview,
yes, which
talks about Joseph Smith owning a Jupiter talisman, about him using a stone in a hat. Mm-hmm. Others use stones, peep stones, with the claims of being able to see spirits, to see spirits guarding treasures underground. The whole Book of Mormon narrative comes out of this idea of a treasure buried in the ground, golden plates, with an angel guarding it, Moroni, and Joseph Smith being able to see all this through a stone and a hat. Right. So Chad is basically just saying, and again, Dr. John, you brought this really important point up both today and last time. If you're going to want power over people, mm-hmm. you need to claim to have special powers. And sometimes you need an object mm-hmm. that you claim helps you have special powers. And the reason why we're bringing up the pendulum isn't to make people look silly. It's to basically introduce that Chad is doing what Joseph Smith did, which is he needs an object to help him appear as though he has more powers so that he can have power over people. And that's why we're talking pendulum, to tie to Joseph Smith and to explain how Chad gets extra powers. Is that all right?
Yeah, and we do believe. Oh, go ahead, John.
Not to go too far with this, but you know, for example, in the Nazi movement, objects, symbols, images, music, all of these things can sway people, right? All of these things are used, like in the Nazi movement, so many of these types of things were used to influence people and to get them to buy into the movement. And so obviously that was a much more extreme version of this, but same idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go ahead and play a clip, and I'll ask Lauren and Dr. John and Mindy to tell me when to stop the clip. But this clip talks about Chad's use of a pendulum. Anything else you want to say, Lauren, to set up this clip?
Yeah, I got in touch with this man who I interviewed, Destin. I think you're playing Destin's interview. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah,
And
Destin Thane.
his name came out in a what we call a document dump that was released, and as someone who was a very special person in a past life. And so we got a hold of him, and he says he was never a believer of Chad, but he had an experience with him. And this is what is called family history, what Chad does. So it's on our YouTube channel.
And what are we going to be hearing Chad doing with this pendulum, just so that that'll help us understand the actual clip better?
He comes with another person to this person's house to tell him who he was in a past life. And this is how he did it.
He uses this necklace as a pendulum to do it. Okay, here we go. Here's the clip.
A time that Chad asked if he could speak with me. We're from the same town. He lives up the road a little bit. An acquaintance. I did not know him well. So he came over with a friend. They asked to speak with me away from my wife, which was a little odd. They took me to a place in my house, and he began to explain what he had been into and a pendulum. And he was asking these questions, and he told me what level of light I was and listed all these people that he thought that I was in what did you call it? Another probation. Anyway, an uncomfortable situation. I sat through it, listened to him, and that was about it. He called it family history. I remember a few of the people that he said that I was, which made me very uncomfortable. They told me that I was not to speak to my wife about it, and they left. And of course I went straight to my wife about it.
That's good.
But a time that
really quickly,
Chad asked if he could speak
so
with me.
You're scrolling on this video like Adam and Abraham and John Taylor and John the Beloved and Noah. Remind us why those names are on the screen.
This was the document dump that I referenced, where I found Destin's name. His name was there as who he was. And what's fascinating again is this comes from a law enforcement investigation. When people want to say this has nothing to do with Mormonism, this is what law enforcement had that was released to the public, Chad's family history documents. And Destin's name was in there. He did not want publicity. He did not want his face, shown, but he was so kind enough. He was kind enough to do this interview with me to explain how this happened and what Chad did. And it was so enlightening. So these are actual documents Chad Daybell put together that landed in law enforcement's hands.
So what is Chad doing with mentioning Enoch and Noah and Abraham? That means
I think he's trying to figure out who was who in past lives.
Yeah, because you've got to track that, right? Like if I tell Mindy she was, Joab or some, or Sariah, I can't go tell somebody else they were Sariah too, right? And so if Eric Smith was Isaiah, then we got to make sure nobody else claims. If somebody else claims to be Isaiah, then there's a problem. So you need some documentation to track who was who in former life.
Well, and honestly, one thing that's interesting about the documents that you just said, what are they? We had the same question you did. You look at those and there's no translation. You don't know what the heck they are, but that's how I found Destin's name. What in the world are these? Oh, well, look, there's a name. I'm going to look him up. Okay, he lives in Rexburg. Can you help me out here? Can you help me figure out what these are? Because I have no idea. And so if you rewind it a bit, it does show Destin's name circled. I started with that and who he was. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. John.
Oh, Dr. John, did you want to add something?
I was just going to say that what he calls family history is what I would call recruitment.
Yeah. I see this as
You're
Chad
shaking your head.
I just think it's just him flexing. I think he's just gotten this power that it's going crazy.
And what's this "don't tell your wife" thing?
I think that is a really important thing to talk about, and was a common theme when they would get in these small groups, oftentimes away from their spouses, when they would talk about these things and talk about more past probations. A very common theme from Chad and Julie and others in the group was, don't tell your spouse about this.
There was a lot of division. We've heard this from multiple sources now, and I have multiple interviews explaining it too.
Yep.
So on camera and off, that Julie Rowe specifically loved to divide the spouses, and Chad Daybell was clearly doing the same thing. And you're right, this was a recruitment effort. I agree with Dr. John. This was recruitment.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, because I want to tie things back to Mormonism, if you study Joseph Smith's practice of polygamy in the Nauvoo time period, there were inner circle people that were allowed to know, and there were lots of people who were actually high-level leaders in the church, like William Law or Emma, who weren't in the know. And so where would Chad get the feeling that he had license to hide things from people, even within inner or outer circles? Well, that really literally comes from Joseph Smith. Emma Smith was like the 21st or 22nd wife sealed to Joseph Smith, because Joseph Smith hid the first 20 wives from her. Yep. It was only until he got caught that he actually fessed up to Emma that he was practicing polygamy or adultery, depending on what you think about Joseph Smith. And again, top leaders, there are several top leaders of the Mormon Church, like Signe Rigdon, like Oliver Cowdery, like William Law, that weren't down with polygamy, and that weren't, Brigham was cool with it, but there were lots that weren't. And so, that practice of hiding things comes directly from Joseph Smith. And so this is where I think it's a good time to introduce something that was kind of like National Enquirer level scandal within this case. There are always discussions in let's just say in the active Orthodox Mormon realm, or in the post-Mormon realm, about ethical non-monogamy or swinging, that sort of thing. And if these are just people, if these sort of neo-prepper Mormons in Rexburg are just people after all, and you've got a bunch of husbands and wives meeting together without their spouses, I guess if you were just putting on your psychological or mental health hat, you would predict that there would be swinging or polygamy going on.
Right. You
would predict it. And it turns out that we learned from your amazing investigative work, and maybe a few others that you've drawn from as sources. I don't know, where you do a good job of incorporating other people's work as well. We learned that, in fact, part of this second and third tier theology is that there really was polygamy or polyandry or swinging going on, even with potentially Chad Daybell, Julie Rowe, and others. And we've got some clips where we talk about that. So that's where this idea of celestial Mormon prepper swinging comes into play. And it ties into this idea of foot zoning and energy work and multiple probations. And we're going to play a couple of clips, but I just want to set it up of how foot zoning, energy work, and multiple probations leads to polygamy and swinging. Do you guys want me to set that up, or do you guys want to set it up?
Go for this. Is all you, John DeLynn.
So if you believe in energy, that we have spirits, and that people like Chad or Julie have special powers to like discern your spirits, or to help you, cure you of trauma, either from this life or past lives. So you need somebody with the special powers, right? But then you need a way to kind of do work on them. And that's where either the Reiki or the foot zoning comes in, where you get them to lie down and you're touching their feet. It's becoming more intimate,
right? Yep.
Which can be a grooming for,
Absolutely.
sexual, shenanigans. You're getting them to lie down on the table. Oftentimes their spouse is there. You're working on their feet. You're saying, I feel your spirit. You were Isaiah. You were Marie Antoinette, you know, and I was Louis the 16th in a past life. We loved each other.
This is just,
You
we're
know,
just continuing our relationship that we
we
previously
had a
right.
bond in a prior life. You know, we were connected.
Right.
You would have met at one of these AVOW or preparing a people conferences. You would have started to feel that sexual tension. Now through foot zoning, you're telling people about what they were in a past life. And even if you've got the spouse there, that starts to groom people for what becomes swinging or polygamy. And sometimes the spouses are even in the room, right? And so we're going to play a couple of clips that address this. And again, I'm going to ask Lauren or Dr. John or Mindy to tell me when to stop the clip, okay? So this first clip, Lauren, do you want to set it up of who it is and what we're talking about in the first clip? This is the clip in your wonderful YouTube channel that's entitled Julie Rowe, Cult Leader or Spiritual Healer. And I think it's a woman that's being interviewed here.
Yeah, this is the interview that really broke it. This is it. And I'm so grateful that this woman and her husband came forward. We refer to her as Girl on Fire. It's the Girl on Fire interview. And she and her husband humbly came forward and said, we were taken into Julie Rowe's cult. We're ashamed. We're not happy. Nobody's talking because they don't want to. And we're going to tell you what happened to us in the hopes that other people will come forward too. So I want to commend Girl on Fire and her husband, Paul. He'll allow me to say Paul. She's Girl on Fire in reference to a podcast she used to have that she's now taken down, for coming forward. And they are who really broke this open.
So the characters in what we're about to hear, Julie Rowe's got this bodyguard, right?
Joel Gervine is her main bodyguard. She has a lot of bodyguards, but Joel Gervine, who we hear about, Joel Gervine is the main bodyguard. We're also going to hear Eric Smith's name, I think, later on, depending how long we play this video. I'm not totally clear. And then Girl on Fire is an anonymous because she wants to stay anonymous. Her husband is Paul, and I am interviewing both of them.
So because Julie Rowe is going to all these conferences and is super prominent, her bodyguard, Paul, then
Joel.
Bodyguard Joel.
Husband
Paul, bodyguard Joel.
Has power and fame because he's associated with Julie. This is how this all power works. So now he can go around and groom people for sexual shenanigans or polygamy
under the guise of
energy work,
or we were married in a previous probation.
The combination of energy work, foot zoning, and multiple probations with because he learned from Julie how to do this discernment, how to do this energy work and this foot zoning. And now he's literally a woman. The Girl on Fire is telling us the story of how Joel groomed her to become his mistress. And he did it partly while Girl on Fire's husband Paul was in the room.
Yes.
Right? Okay. Yes. Here's the clip. And this is so great and disturbing. Okay, sorry.
With him, and Paul was there. Like, we were all in the same room together, and he's on Paul's feet first, and a little awkward because the guy doing it on a guy's feet.
The guy is groomed first.
So Paul's like, it was a little awkward, but it was fine. And then when he got to,
I just want to pause that. And so, just to be clear, Joel is grooming Girl on Fire, but he foot zones the husband Paul first,
right,
to kind of make Paul comfortable with Joel touching his wife, right?
Yes, fair. Absolutely.
I mean, it's just so bizarre.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll continue.
My feet, I felt again how I felt in that energy conference. Like I was under some hypnotic state, and he was looking at me differently. Like I could just sense it and feel it. But what do I say at that time? I could have said, no, you're right. But I didn't, because I didn't know what was going on. So, and they were supposed to be our friends. Like he was supposed to be our friend. And anyway, so I noticed that was going on. He'd use essential oils because that's, what you do when you do foot zoning. You apply essential oils on. Different oils can help with different ailments, or you can pray or bless them to help. pray for them, the oils, just like you can do anything. Whatever he was doing, it was foot zoning, but in a spiritual sense, manipulation sense, it was using that as a means to get closer to me.
Right.
And manipulate me more. I believe that when I was in the energy conference, I think that's when it started. But and then as he came around, then I noticed different things. But so then they got done zoning our feet and he left, and then he texted me the next day and was just like, hey, how you doing from it? And I'm like, I definitely felt some different things. And he's like, oh, that's good. That's good. And some of it had to do with multiple probation stuff of, okay, so as this woman was teaching foot zoning, she mingled in energy work somehow. So not only are you foot zoning and touching the person physically, they were trying to do energy work, which means getting to your spirit to figure out things is what they were doing.
Tapping into the subconscious is what somebody would say.
Yes.
Okay.
From the world, but in that sense, it's spiritual.
Right. So I knew that he was learning this from this lady. And I asked him when he texted me, I was like, yeah, I feel different, but like, did you find anything out? Like, meaning multiple probation stuff or anything about me? Like, I obviously at that point, I was naive to this stuff. Yeah, people can say like, well, you were dumb. Like, I had no idea. This stuff was all new with multiple probations and the way they were teaching energy.
Right.
So I didn't know.
So mistakes are made.
Yeah,
I think that's one thing I want to make clear, that a lot of others that were in this group don't want to admit to that there was mistakes made and things that we could have done to
change things.
Yeah, to shield or protect ourselves more, but we didn't. And so us specifically, there's a lot of shame involved with that, right? Because you made a mistake, you sinned, or you were taken advantage of. And so that's very real, and that's part of the process that we had to go through. But
I also see what you said, taken advantage of. I'm sensing myself a lot of grooming.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Grooming, a lot of
grooming.
You to trust them. To put your trust in them.
Yeah.
This is right. This is good. So I want you to know that I'm seeing a lot of that.
Absolutely, 100%. And so he's like, but there's some things that I learned.
Okay, really quick. I like the part where she actually talks about their texting back and forth. But Mindy, I mean, there's so much to just unpack already. We may want to return.
Yeah, that story to be continued.
Yes, that's. I don't know if we'll play more clips or if we want to just kind of talk about what happens after that.
What were your reactions, Mindy, to what you heard? I'm just curious.
I mean, I just think it's classic grooming, and I think that Lauren touches on that. I was honest. I was signaling you just with some notes about what's going to happen later on in the conversation, so I wasn't quite sure if we wanted to keep listening to this gripping interview.
Well, a couple things that stuck. Tell me if this stuck out for you. Like just the idea. We talked about the Mormon Church not teaching people. Part of this is, to what extent is the Mormon Church culpable or liable? Like, these people have been raised Mormon, right? They've been raised to distrust science, to distrust evidence, and to believe that people have spiritual gifts and powers. That's all, whether it's patriarchal blessings or priesthood healings, like that, or psychologists are bad, or evolution's wrong, or global flood and a 6,000-year earth. That's a mindset that you can easily be raised with in mainstream Mormonism. Sure. And so you hear Girl on Fire going, I didn't know, like he's telling me he's got powers and I'm believing him. And what can I do? Also,
right. Very real. Right. She was she really had no idea.
Yeah. And I think it's really brave of her to tell that story and to be vulnerable about, kind of getting taken by this. But yeah, that struck me too, as she was talking about how she called it hypnosis, that she felt like she just was hypnotized by him. And I think it's an illustration of women, a lot of women, and maybe in the Mormon framework, who just are used to kind of outsourcing their power to other people, to men. And maybe that's, kind of how she was interpreting that, Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And tell me if you agree that when I heard her talking about like a hex or brainwashing, but it almost felt like she was trying, because clearly she went on to have an emotional affair
Yes.
with Paul,
With,
right?
no, with Paul's her husband.
With Joel. I'm
Yes.
sorry, I'm so bad with
With
names.
the bodyguard Joel.
Yes.
Girl on Fire ends up having an emotional affair with Joel. They in the video they go on to talk about the text back and forth. Like clearly they're kind of hot for each other because they're at these prepper conferences without their spouses,
Right.
spending time together. They're in these, little meetings at someone's house without their spouses because their spouses have to watch the kids.
Right.
Under the guise of like developing more spiritually, they're spending time together without their spouses, getting hot. And instead of her just saying we were hot for each other and we were without our spouses and we were developing emotional intimacy, it almost seemed like she wanted to say that somehow Joel was hexing her with spells.
Yeah.
And this goes back to, okay, you can have spiritual gifts and you can either use them in good ways or bad ways. Joel still has spiritual gifts, but in this case, Joel was using them in dark ways instead of in good ways. Did I get that right or wrong? Or did you not get that?
Yeah, I would say, Dr. John, it sounded like you were going to say something about that.
Well, I just think she's trying to, I agree with you guys there. I think she's trying to explain away what's happening. Yeah. She's trying to kind of rid herself of agency, right?
Exactly.
To cover up for the fact that maybe there were some desires there, or maybe she was feeling something, and she obviously has to deal with her husband on that issue too. So this is certainly an easy way to explain it away, is to say that she was hypnotized or she was under a spell, but it's not really owning it.
Well, I want to give her credit though a little bit too. Like I believe that she really believes that. She's not like trying.
Yeah.
When she brings this up, she's not trying to hide something. She's really trying to make sense of
That's
what
how
happened.
she feels.
And I can say that because that's how she feels. I can say that because I've also had conversations with her outside of the interview. And she's really also, I think, just trying to process during this interview what happened to her. You know what I mean? I think this is also her still trying to figure it out, you know what I mean, because of the shame. So
yeah, the research on hypnosis is pretty clear, though. It's not hypnosis that changes people. It's their willingness to engage in the fantasies or imaginative elements of hypnosis that matters.
And the fantasy though starts with multiple probations too, though, like that's where the grooming comes in, is the power over another. This man is Julie Rowe's bodyguard. Right. And if you want to keep playing the story, it is long, but it's compelling. This is Julie Rowe's bodyguard, and he's about to come to her and say, no, we were married in a past life. And he stands by it even, with her husband.
I wanted to just add really quickly, I think part of the grooming process as well is the multiple probation talking and kind of on the down low. It seemed like at this point with Girl on Fire and Paul, like they'd heard about it, but they hadn't really been kind of brought into that inner circle of what was happening. So I think that was part of the grooming process as well, as they were anticipating, are we going to be the extra special ones that kind of get to hear about this and get involved and get pulled into this inner circle? And I think that was part of that grooming, where it made them a little more ripe to be susceptible to this happening.
And you could argue, or I could argue, that it is a form of hypnosis to say that you were married in a past life, to bring in the multiple probation part, especially when it's novel. And
it's manipulation.
She's not expecting it. So that is, I'm sure that's what she was feeling. That would be a type of hypnosis in a way.
Interesting.
So Lauren, I moved off the video, so I lost the place I was at. Why don't you go ahead and just tell us what when they go to your actual YouTube channel and watch the full interview,
they should watch.
What will they hear?
Yeah, please watch the full interview. And like I said, I have a lot of empathy and compassion for these two that came forward. Yes. But she said at that point, Joel came back, again, Julie Rowe's bodyguard, and said, I know who you were in a past life, and we were married. And she was so confused, and she was feeling emotional things towards Joel. So then she thought, well, maybe it's true, right? So again, there's that whole that she can't even process any romantic feeling because it's all jumbled with, was I married to him? It's all confusing to her. And they had been followers of Julie Rowe and listening to Julie Rowe for years at this point. And she finally told Paul, and Paul called Joel and said, "What in the world are you doing? Don't ever call me, again." He goes, and he still tried. Joel said, "No, I was married to your wife in a past life, and this is real. And we all we're all going to be married in heaven, and we all can procreate with whoever we want. And I was married to Girl on Fire. So suck it up, Paul, because, this is real." And Eric Smith and Julie Rowe and others confirmed what he was saying. That was the end for Girl on Fire and her husband. And, there's more to it, and you can hear it in the interview.
Not the end of them as a couple, but the end of them being involved in the movement.
Thank you for clarifying that. That was the end of them being in Julie Rowe's movement. They got closer as a couple, according to them, and my interview with them, and are still members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, and I want to say too that I reached out to Joel, bodyguard of Julie Rowe, and he did send me a statement that is in its entirety on our YouTube channel as well. And he confirms their story and states that unfortunately it was because he believed that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy, and that it was Julie Rowe that taught him that Joseph Smith really didn't, and the church made that up. So there you go.
So we have a clip of Eric Smith basically describing his, the existence of, I don't know, what would you say, Lauren?
So this is kind of what I was talking about, that the belief that because it gets blurry, right? So in Mormon theology, we believe in Mormon theology, it's eternal families. And so if you throw in multiple probations, the eternal families things gets a little, confusing. And so I was asking Eric about this, and I was also Girl on Fire and her husband Paul tried to explain it to me as well. So how do you combine the idea of eternal families with multiple probations and all of these past spouses? Is that a good explanation?
Yeah. Let's and you tell me when to stop this clip, okay? Okay.
This is the doctor you shared with me. This was Eric
Smith,
Joel Gervine.
Yes, they both agreed with this.
They shared with me that the way that eternal marriage works is that we are all married to each other in heaven, and basically we just decide who we're going to procreate with or have spiritual children with. But we're all married to each other.
A lot of these teachings came from Eric Smith.
Right. Well, here's a thought.
I mean, that's pretty good.
I don't know all the answers.
Stop there.
This is the shared with me.
Okay.
Eric goes on to explain it, but that's.
So was Eric potentially involved in that? Was he married at the time you interviewed him, Lauren?
Yes. And he said that his relationship with his wife is now good.
Okay.
I also asked him about being a past spouse of Julie, which I've heard, and a few other things in that interview. You can check it out. Yes, he was.
Yeah, and so
involved.
So just to be clear, there are allegations that Chad and Julie had some type of intimate or sexual relationship. And then there's all sorts of allegations that Julie had multiple men. This is where the polyandry comes in. Mm-hmm. That Julie was alienating several men from their spouses,
right?
And that Julie was potentially sexually involved with lots of different men. Is that what you understand, Lauren and Dr. John?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anything you want to add, Dr. John?
I think it speaks for itself.
Okay. And I'll just make the point that, again, there's always the whole point of this podcast is how much of this is just what normal humans do, and then how much of this is influenced by Mormonism and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I just have to say, Joseph Smith practiced polygamy. He practiced polyandry. He taught about celestial marriage and eternal marriage. He taught that we all become gods someday. And there's this idea, would all of these, Rexburg and Draper and Mesa Mormons, would they all have just all of a sudden started swinging together as believing Mormons? There's this quote that I think I referenced last time where good people are always going to do good things. There's always going to be good people doing good things and bad people doing bad things. To get good people to do bad things, you need religion. And the idea there is that it was a belief that, wow, polygamy is scriptural. It's in Doctrine and Covenants 132. Joseph Smith, our founding prophet, practiced it. Wow, there is the teaching of eternal marriage, but also now there's this teachings of spiritual gifts and revelation and prophecy. And whoa, I'm feeling attracted to these people I'm meeting at these conferences. And whoa, I trust their spiritual gifts. And wow, now I'm being told that I was, your spouse in a prior life. Oh, well, that's what these feelings mean. I think that's how Joseph Smith, thinking about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Solomon and David and the concubines and the wives, I think Joseph Smith, having the Old Testament theology in his brain and then interacting with all these women as a powerful man, that's how Joseph Smith gets the quote revelation that he's supposed to restore all things. Oops. Oh no, angel and flaming sword. I have to be a polygamist. Okay, let me sleep with 30 or 40 different women because God needs me to. That's the same sort of way that Chad and Julie and lots of other people, because of the Mormonism, because of the Mormon theology and history, that's how Mormon preppers become swingers. Is that, people are going to argue or not argue. That's the case. Do you think that's crazy, Mindy?
I mean, you present a compelling argument that I think is pretty fair.
Yeah.
I don't feel maybe as passionate about it as you do, but I think that it, yeah.
Well, I don't know if I believe it or not. I'm just making a case.
I think it's an important correlation.
Without DNC 132, without Joseph's 40 wives, without a belief in multiple probations and spirits, and would this have happened?
It's what Joel Gervine blamed it on.
Yeah.
So when I received my statement from Joel Gervine, which he wanted me to read in its entirety, so I want to emphasize the whole thing is on our YouTube channel because I'm only reading part of it now. He blamed it on the fact that he believed Joseph Smith practiced polygamy.
Yeah.
Wow. Yep. Interesting.
Okay. I think maybe it's time, unless you guys want to go somewhere else, to introduce Laurie Vallow into the picture. Should we do that?
Let's do it.
Sure.
So, Dr. John, you do a great job of talking about both Chad's background and Laurie Vallow's background. What should we introduce about Laurie into the picture? And we do have a clip of her recorded testimony where she talks a bit about some of her life that we prepped and staged for this interview. But why don't we start with you guys introducing her a little bit?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of pieces to introducing Laurie. One would be her relationship with Chad. She, as far as as best as we can tell, she starts reading Chad's books around 2014, 2015.
Do you mind just giving a 1-minute sketch on like her, I don't want to be mean and say train wreck of a life before meeting Chad, but
okay,
just give a 1-minute sketch of her background.
So I think if you want to understand Laurie's background, you have to understand her father, Barry Cox. And the best way maybe to understand Barry Cox is to know that he wrote a book where he argued strongly that the IRS should be abolished. And not only did he write this book, but he actually filed a lawsuit against the government and believed that the IRS was unconstitutional and should be abolished. In addition to that, he was convicted of tax evasion and had to pay back hundreds of thousands of dollars to the IRS. So obviously that was before all that. That was before the book, but there's clearly some animosity towards the government and the IRS, in spite of the fact that he wants to abolish it. So, and there's a lot more on Barry that we could talk about, but I think if you want to understand the Cox family, that's probably a good place to start, because it shows his extreme beliefs, and it shows that this is not a typical family. I mean, I'm sure most of the listeners out there aren't necessarily big fans of the IRS, but to want to abolish it completely, to just demolish it, that's another thing altogether. I think there's something, there's something a little oppositional about that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good place to start. That this is not a typical family. If the Daybell family was what I called unremarkable, then the Cox family is much more remarkable in the sense that their father is kind of this dominant, extreme guy with these extreme beliefs, and I have to believe that his beliefs in the church were also fairly on the extreme side. He was also going to preparing to people conferences, and I think it's fair to generalize from kind of this hatred of the IRS and government
Family takes
to the family culture, to see that, and to his religious beliefs, and to how those elements of Barry Cox really influenced the family and the family culture.
Okay.
So she comes from an extremely LDS, anti-government family, a father who doesn't follow law, or thinks he's above the law. And also they all read many near-death experience books growing up. I've heard that from a very reliable source.
There's also a story out, again, like, I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on this, but this kind of provides a little snapshot of Barry and kind of the family culture. I think since Barry's such a dominant guy, it's really important to understand him in particular. There's a story where Steve Cope, who was married to Barry's daughter, Stacy Cox, they went through a contentious divorce, and there were some custody battles going on. And Barry decided that he would show up. This is actually in a victim statement that Steve Cope gave to the police. Barry showed up at his place of employment, and he began to quote scripture, and talk about, Barry told Steve Cope that he had no integrity, and he was quoting scripture to him. And then Steve Cope reminded him that he had just been charged with solicitation of prostitution. So I'm sure that irked Barry. He became agitated, and he proceeded to grab Steve's shirt and pin him up against the wall and to try to strangle him. I don't know how far that went. I think
there was an assault. Yeah.
But he was charged with assault and domestic violence before he left. So to me, that's a really fascinating story because it combines so many elements. You have the kind of the sanctimonious, self-righteous quoting of scripture, and then he assaults someone after being reminded that he solicited prostitutes. So wow, right? What an interesting, and there's a record of that. I don't know the disposition of any of that, by the way. I don't know. We can't find the disposition of the prostitution charge. We can't find the disposition on the assault charges. So we don't know what happened. It may have all been dismissed. But in a really small, nutshell, I think that's a really interesting picture of Lori's father.
Someone's saying, so it's opinion. It's not opinion. It was in a custody battle document that this happened. That's what we're relaying. And then I want to say that he did spend time in prison for tax evasion and also was charged with practicing law without a law license. So this is Barry Cox. There's plenty of evidence who Barry Cox is. To add some basics to it, I want to say, go ahead, babe. Or to add some basics, Lori Daybell grew up in this home. In addition to on those custody battle docs, Barry Cox states in a letter to the court that he tries to teach his son-in-law that women are delicate flowers that you need to nourish. So he's quite a misogynist. So he, Lori was raised to be a delicate flower. She was raised in this very dysfunctional home where the law wasn't, followed. And then she was a cheerleader. She was supposed to be beautiful, and she'd been married 5 times.
And let me just say on the opinion issue, no, there's not knowing the disposition doesn't make it an opinion. We know that there's a charge of soliciting prostitutes. That's real. That's in a police report, and there's a charge of assault and domestic violence against Steve Cope. That's real. That's in writing. Just because there wasn't a conviction, that doesn't mean that it's an opinion. It means that there is an actual charge on his record somewhere. So
what I'm hearing you guys say is that she grew up in, her dad was a piece of work. Whatever the charges are, her dad was a piece of work.
Right.
Let me quickly just give a shout out to a couple YouTube viewers, It's Just Robbie donated to this program through the super chat. He wrote, "Thank you for all you do. You help so many people. Even if they're non-members, you're great." Thanks. It's Just Robbie for that super chat donation on YouTube. And then Tina writes, "Thank you for what you do. I've been fascinated by Mormon history for many years." Just like Mormon Stories podcast, Hidden, a true crime podcast, is also supported by donor support. So we want to thank everyone who donates to Mormon Stories to make this program possible, including those who are donating right now on the YouTube Super Chat feature. And I also want to encourage people to support Hidden, a True Crime podcast
True crime
as well. I'm struggling with the words a little bit.
That's fine.
So going back, so Lori's dad was a piece of work. She grows up as a Mormon, as a cheerleader. And you said she was married multiple times. Is that right?
Correct.
Yes.
And do we know why so many times? What could we say about why she was married so many times? Is that just bad luck?
Yeah.
Is that just bad luck? Is that a reflection of her?
I'm sure it had to do with both parties, but I think that when you're raised in a home like Lori was raised, I'll say it. So I would say there's probably some personality disorders. There was probably some impulsiveness.
Daddy issues, maybe.
Yeah, but go ahead, John.
I think so we talk about this in one of our episodes. There's a book by Pressman and Pressman called The Narcissistic Family. And I want to make it clear, I'm not labeling anyone in the family as a narcissist. They talk about the family culture. So I want to stay away from that label in terms of calling anyone that. But what they say essentially is that when there's a dominant parent, it could be a mother or father, they take all the oxygen in the family. And so the other family members have trouble breathing, right? It's like the metaphor of the large oak and the acorns that don't get enough sunlight to really grow and kind of spread their wings and become oaks themselves. I think when you have a family culture like this, the father is so dominant that the children really aren't getting their needs met. And the children are in some ways a reflection of the father, or at the very least, they want the father's adoration at all costs. And that piece, Lori wanting her father's adoration, in spite of the fact that the family is really dysfunctional, is going to be an important piece in terms of understanding her relationship later with Chad Daybell.
Yes.
And really quickly, let's add, thank you, Dr. John and Lauren. Let's just add how these children come into the picture. Is that okay? Because there's multiple spouses and I think there's an adoption. And so can we just talk about the children and Lori as
all three? Yeah, I'll take that. Does that work? All three children have a different father.
There's three children, not two. There's a third.
There's three children. Colby is still alive. He was the one that was not murdered, and he was married and had a baby girl at the time. So,
and Colby was the child of which husband number what of Lori? Did we even
number two?
Number two.
Number two.
Okay.
No, not Joseph Ryan.
I'm sorry.
William Lagonia.
Okay.
So,
Colby's from husband. No known child from husband number one.
Correct.
Right.
Colby is child from husband number two.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And then a divorce and a marriage to Joe Ryan, and Tylee Ryan is from that marriage to Joe.
Biological.
Okay.
Okay.
Biological. And then there's a divorce, and she marries Charles Vallow, and they have a blended family. He has two sons from a previous marriage. She has her two children, and they want a child together. So they adopt JJ, who was Charles Vallow's sister's grandson. So Charles Vallow's sister, Kay, who's the biological grandmother of JJ, had custody of her grandson. And Charles came along and said, hey, to Kay Woodcock, Lori and I would love to adopt JJ. So to his sister, he said, we would love to adopt your grandchild. JJ, we would love a son or a child of our own. We would love to do this. And after a while, and that happened. So JJ's biological grandparents who sounded the alarm, that they're important. The Woodcocks, it's Charles Vallow's sister, but still the grandchild. So that gets confusing. The grandmother.
Okay. I love it. So that's how we got the three kids. And so talk about Lori's emotional state and maybe her fourth marriage that kind of makes her interested in preppers and NDEs, near-death experiences. That kind of, how does she even, what's going on in her life that leads her to Chad, basically? And how do they get introduced? Is that okay? Can we go there?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Dr. John, did you want to speak to that, or do you want? I mean, she was very religious, very religious.
Just quickly, Lauren, is your signal okay? You're freezing a little bit.
She's okay for me. She's okay for us.
She's okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you guys are coming out of the same home, so there may be a little bit of bandwidth issues for you guys.
Right.
I do think that Lori internalized all of the marriages, and
I mean, that's not the Mormon ideal, to be married four times, right?
Right. And just from interviews with, some of her family members, I think her brother speculated that maybe she was hoping that maybe her marriage to Chad would kind of redeem her because he was like really righteous, and maybe she felt like a failure because she'd had so many marriages that had ended.
But what was she even doing going to the prepper things? Like, how did she?
I think she was introduced to some of these books and the stuff way before she met Chad. Correct, Lauren?
Yes, correct. She was a big fan of Julie Rowe. She read Julie Rowe's books. She started reading Chad's books in 2015, we know.
And also the Denver Snuffers books, right?
She loved Denver Snuffers, The Second Comforter. Loved it. She would give it to her friends as gifts. She loved it. She loved Visions of Glory. She loved it.
And for those who didn't join us last time, Denver Snuffer was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, served in a stake high council, lives right now as an attorney in Sandy, Utah. And he came out with a series of books basically saying the Mormon church, the corporate Mormon church is kind of like lagging in semi-apostasy. You can cut out the middleman and have direct visitations with Jesus if you follow me and are righteous enough. So he has several books. What are the names of at least one of those books?
The Second Comforter is the specific book that we know Lori read and loved and would give to her friends.
And it's the idea of, hey, you can meet Jesus and you don't need the corporate church to be there. So
right. And she absolutely believed that she had met Jesus without doubt. And then she loved Mike Stroud. Mike Stroud is another one who he has an altar in his home, and he also believes in these visions. They're all visionary. They all believe in the second coming is near. They all have had near-death experiences. Those are sort of like kind of the trend. They all believe that you can have your own visions. So Denver Snuffer, Mike Stroud is a very important one that we haven't mentioned yet. John Pontius's Visions of Glory that I've showed you. Julie Rowe was huge. She was absolutely a huge reader of Julie Rowe, and then started reading Chad's books in 2015, which are also about the second coming. So she was fully engulfed in this community and these belief systems.
And we should probably say, in all fairness, that Denver Snuffer was excommunicated in 2013. So that's the Mormon church basically saying, we don't like some guy saying, cut us out as the middlemen. We don't like some guy saying you can have a direct relationship with God and Jesus, because the church needs to be the intermediary between you and God. And so that's how Denver Snuffer got the axe. And also Julie
Stroud. Julie Rowe's been excommunicated. Mike Stroud, who was once a seminary teacher, has now been excommunicated. Eric Smith's been excommunicated. Julie Rowe's been excommunicated.
And do you think all these excommunications happen before even Lori Vallow comes on the scene, or did some of these happen after Lori Vallow comes on the scene? When I say the scene, I mean the preparing a people scene.
Denver Snuffer was excommunicated for sure. Not sure timeline of Mike Stroud.
Okay.
John Pontius never was, because he died at publication. Okay. I don't know if Eric Smith, Julie Rowe well before.
Okay.
I don't know about Eric Smith. I know the date, but I can't think of it.
So by this time, there's a bunch of Mormon neo-fundamentalist preppers that are still active in the church. They're in Rexburg. They're in, Draper, Sandy. They're in Arizona, Mesa. They're all going to these conferences. They're still active believing members, but they're starting to go off the reservation, and they're following Denver and Julie and others, believing in near-death experiences. And the Mormon church is in this pickle because it doesn't want to excommunicate, 10% of its membership in the United States. but also it's cutting off the heads of all these leaders, because the church is realizing, man, we're losing liberals and, you know, we're losing people on the left who are learning about the church history and leaving and apostatizing, but we're also having all these unapproved, I'll just say crazies from the Mormon church's
I would be careful.
perspective.
I'd be careful.
Oh, what should I say? What should we say? Just,
I don't know.
What would the Mormon church leaders think of the neo-fundamentalists?
Just
unapproved.
Yeah, very unorthodox, outside the correlated approved sources. Yeah.
Thank you for that
need
correction. Crazy is a bad word. Thank you. I appreciate that. High fist bump. Yeah. So, but the Mormon church is feeling like it's losing control on both sides. And this prepper Julie Rowe, Deborah Snuffer thing is part of it. And but Lori Vallow comes into this, a believing Temple recommend holding Mormon. And maybe we can talk about that as a setup to the clip we have. Do you want to?
And I think, it's important to bring up preparing a people. I just realized that. Very important to bring up preparing a people. Preparing a people is run by an LDS married couple. They would do these conferences, and it was really just about visionaries and being just a better Mormon, you know, and it was all about
be a better Mormon.
Yeah, the better Mormon, right? Like, you're all around all these Mormons, you can still be different and better. And they would do, you know, second coming talk, near-death experiences, and again, the visionary thing. And what would also happen is Lori and her entire family of origin was into this preparing a people conferences, and they were all over. They were in Arizona, they were in Utah, they would travel, they would have a whole panel of speakers. And so it really got the ball rolling for a lot of this, I think, is the ability to be able to head to these conferences and feel like you're just enjoying, you know, like a BYU, it's like BYU Education Week, you know, there's no difference. And so I think that that's an important part of this too. And Chad was a speaker at these conferences, these preparing a people conferences. They absolutely gave him a platform. They've now rebranded, by the way. They're still doing it. They're now Latter Day Media, the same two people. And Lori would attend these conferences to be enlightened and fulfilled, and so would her parents.
And this is Dr. John, let me say one quick thing.
Yeah.
When I'm living in Logan in Cache Valley in 2013, 14, and 15, there are members of my ward that are attending both the Snuffer events and the Preparing a People events. I would say probably every ward or branch in Utah
along the Wasatch Front,
or definitely along the Wasatch Front, all the way down to St. George and into Arizona and Idaho.
Absolutely.
This is every Mormon ward has at least 5 to 10 to 20 people that are a part of all this at some level. Mindy, is that your experience?
I feel like that's probably fair.
Yeah.
I think it's
so this is a big deal.
Yeah.
And we're talking historically, retroactively. This was becoming a really big deal, and it still is a big deal.
Right.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. John.
Yeah. So, to me, the most important piece is Lori's encounter with Chad's books in 2015. Yes, I agree with you guys that the foundation was set with Denver Snuffer and Julie Rowe, and she was reading all of that stuff, but she was really smitten with Chad Daybell and his books, and she was creating this fantasy of who this guy was and this world and this vision he was creating, and she was buying into this fantasy. And simultaneous with that, we know from talking to Colby, who's Lori's son, I met with Colby for 3 or 4 hours, and I've talked to him several times since, that she also was a huge fan of Twilight, the Twilight series. So when you factor that in, and we know that Twilight, by the way, was written by Stephanie Myers, who's a Mormon, or was a Mormon. I don't know if she's active. But the basis of Twilight is this eternal love, right? This immortal, eternal love between a human and a vampire. And I think you have Lori creating this fantasy from Chad's books and from Twilight about the perfect person who unfortunately is not the husband she's married to at the time. So I think she's probably growing apart from him, and she is starting to look for, maybe not actively, maybe unconsciously, someone who can fulfill more of this fantasy that she's been creating. So that to me is kind of the setup to the Preparing a People meeting in October 2018 when she hears Chad speak. She's not just hearing Chad speak. She's attending that speech with this enormous fantasy that she's already created for years, since 2015, and with this whole Twilight backdrop of, you know, this incredible, intense, eternal love between a vampire and a human, right? So it, you know, you've got all these elements in place that seem to, I think, influence her when she steps in front of Chad Daybell for the first time.
Good.
I love it. We got a comment on here. YouTube viewer, it's just Robbie writes, Dr. John with another slam dunk. Let's go ahead and play. We set up a little clip of Lori talking. It's this little clip about temple recommend or something else, right? Do you guys want to set that clip up and then we'll play it just to give a sense of Lori's mindset maybe before meeting Chad? Is that okay?
Yeah. Why don't
you set it up, Lauren, and I'll talk about it.
This was in October 2018. This is a testimony meeting, but it's not at church. It's a private testimony meeting among private friends who are gathering together to talk about the bigger, better tier 2 Mormonism. And so this is in Melanie Gibbs' home. This was Lori's best friend. And in Melanie Gibbs' home, everyone decided to bear their testimonies. In Lori Daybell's, it was Vallow, excuse me. Lori Vallow, at this time, she was still married to Charles, October 2018, was bearing her testimony about why she, about some of her extreme beliefs. It's a very long testimony. It's extreme, but this is just a part of it.
So Lori's attending now these preparing a pupil conferences in a vow. She's getting into it. She's meeting
people.
She's meeting in these little side groups and starting to get indoctrinated into this new second and third tier Mormonism. Right?
Correct.
Prepper, Rexburg Mormonism.
And in this point, too, just to set the stage a little bit more, she's referring to some hard things in her life because they all have this backstory, right? So her backstory is, she says that she was married to a man who was abusive and abused her children. We're just saying what she said. We're not saying that's true. She's saying this and she's explaining where her mind went.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
And Lauren, you can just tell us when to stop this clip, okay?
Okay.
And of all those things, and after we were divorced, he told everybody that I was this lying, crazy Mormon, and got up in court and said all these horrible things about me, and turned it around to where the judges believed him instead of me. And he was constantly trying to get custody of my 3-year-old daughter, and just to rub it in my face. And I went through a lot of years of this kind of hard stuff, and I was going to murder him. I was going to kill him, like the scriptures say, like Nephi killed him, just to stop the pain and to stop him coming after me and to stop him coming after my children. And I just thought I couldn't take it anymore. And I would go through the scriptures and find all the things like, if he comes against you once, if he comes against you twice, if he comes against you 3 times, then you can kill him. It says it in the scriptures. And I'm like, there it is. There's my answer. I don't want to do anything that's wrong. I did not have a murderous heart. I just wanted to stop the bleeding and stop the pain. And so someone wise was speaking to me and said, you need to go to the temple. So I went and met my bishop, and I was like, I'm either going to turn my life to the temple or I'm going to commit murder. So do you want to give me a temple recommend?
There you go.
I was perfectly honest, because at that point,
Okay.
Wow.
I've got something I want to say as a reaction, but I'll give you guys all a chance to mention. If you don't mention it, I will. So, Mindy,
It's
do you
not your
want
typical temple recommend interview, is it?
I'm either going to murder my husband or give me a recommend. Yeah, it doesn't usually
let's
go
go for
that
the temple
way.
recommend. Let's go.
Let's see if that fixes your thoughts.
Lauren, what are your reactions to that video? What's important to you in that video?
The either or, the black or white,
Yes.
the two extremes. Talk about a lack of complex thinking. I'm either trying to figure out a way to justify a way to kill this man, or I'm going to just need to really, really, really dig into my religion and religious extremism and start going to the temple all day, every day. But there's no in between here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. John?
Point.
Yeah, I think you guys just stole a little bit of my thunder, but yeah, there's this binary type thinking, right? This either or thinking. And if we were gonna sit down and brainstorm, if we were involved in some type of relationship strife or problems and we had to come up with a list and check some boxes about how to handle the situation, I'm pretty sure that most of us would come up with more boxes than either murder or temple, right? So it's incredible to me that murder is the first box she's willing to check. That shows me a couple of things. She lacks cognitive flexibility, obviously. She's very close-minded, right? So also, we kind of know, like, this is around the time she meets Chad. We know that she says she doesn't have a murderous heart, but maybe she has a murderous mind, right? Like, it's on her mind. It's on her radar. Which is atypical.
Well, Dr. John, I want you to keep going with your flow, but I just have to interject. Where would she get the idea that murder in any case was justifiable within a believing in God, faithful Mormon context?
Can I answer that?
Tells us, yes, go, Lauren.
Tell us. Yeah.
She mentioned it, and I need to, I want to talk about this because it's really made me see this in a different light too. I was taught this growing up, this story of Laban and Nephi. And she mentioned that in the testimony. She started to, and she cut herself off. If you hear it, Nephi lay, just like, I was going to kill, just like Nephi killed Lay, and then she kept going.
Yeah.
But it was absolutely her thought process.
The non-Mormons, tell us what Nephi and Laban, what she means for the non-Mormons who've never read the Book of Mormon. Chapter 3, like in the first 10 pages of the Book of Mormon, what would a reader find?
I will go and do the things which the Lord hath commanded, for I know the Lord giveth no commandment unto the children of men, save he shall prepare a way for them to commandment. I have this memorized from childhood. And Nephi knew that he could follow the Lord's direction and knew that he could accomplish by getting these brass plates, and the Lord would find a way, and the Lord delivered Laban drunk. So thus he killed him to accomplish what the Lord had commanded him to do. And I have this scripture memorized. It was scripture mastery that we learned in seminary.
Even in song, there's the song, the Lord commanded Nephi to go and get the plates from the wicked Laban inside the city gates. Laban and Lemuel were both afraid to try. Nephi was courageous. This was his reply. I will go.
Okay, that's enough of us.
Well, I'm proud to say I don't know the song. I'm glad I can say that.
No, but, the Lord tells Nephi in the Book of Mormon to go chop off Laban's head so that he can there's no other way that God can use his power to get these brass plates that are so essential other than for Nephi to chop off Laban's head. And Nephi is the hero of the first half of the Book of Mormon. So that's where Lori would get the idea that murder was okay. If a spirit comes to you, if God comes to you, if you talk to Jesus anyway, and God comes to you and says, your husband is inconvenient, you now have spiritual license to commit murder. Is that,
Yeah. And I want to say this. I hope, with all hope, and I don't know what's going, that the LDS Church stops putting an emphasis on this story. I really, really
or renounces it. Renounces it.
Right.
Yes.
Trent, a viewer, says the Bible also has ample precedent for divinely sanctioned
Absolutely.
murder.
Absolutely.
And I would also say that and Lori's not the first. If you look at like the Lafferty brothers, if you go read John Krakauer's book, Under the Banner of Heaven, there have been lots of murders committed by Mormons, by believing Mormons, where the Laban story was used as justification.
Yep.
Yeah. And you don't need the Book of Mormon. You can just use the Bible. Anyway, sorry. Keep going, Lauren and Dr. John.
Yeah. Keep going, Dr. John.
So I think the singing though is really going to dominate this segment. So I don't think we can ever top that. But thank you for that. That was a fine piece of entertainment. I enjoyed it.
Oh, there's more.
That's a TikTok. That's a TikTok clip.
Oh goodness, no. Dr. John, continue.
So this is a little tricky, but I would say that from a psychological standpoint, that Lori clearly has what we call an external locus of control. And that means essentially that she's getting motivated and kind of taking directions from things outside of herself. So in this case, religion or the temple or the Book of Mormon, whatever. But all of that kind of leads me in the direction of also wondering, to what extent does this woman have a moral compass, or to go even further, like a conscience, right? Like if your conscience essentially, if if you need the temple or a bishop or the Book of Mormon or somebody to tell you that you shouldn't murder someone, then to what degree do you really have a conscience? And I think we're seeing some of that here. You know, it's and by the way, a lack of a conscience is highly associated with psychopathy. So most psychopaths don't have a conscience. So I don't know enough about Lori to diagnose her. And actually, psychopathy is not really a diagnosis per se. It's not in the DSM, but I think we're starting to see some potential elements of psychopathy here in this little speech. So if that's true,
is it a antisocial personality disorder? Is that the DSM?
Yeah, antisocial personality disorder is how the DSM tries to pick it up, but psychopathy is a very specific subset of that.
Okay.
So, you know, roughly maybe 10%, 10 to 15% of people with antisocial personality disorder will have psychopathy.
Got it.
So, although 75% of the people in prison would be diagnosed with psychopathy. So, it you know, this little segment we played, I think, really reveals a great deal if you kind of dig a little deeper. And one of the most concerning pieces of that is that question I have about whether she lacks a conscience. And because typically, you know, it's so abnormal for someone in this predicament who's dealing with some relationship struggles to go immediately to murder. It's so abnormal.
I have a question about that, Dr. John, because you talked to people that knew Lori who say she was a loving mom.
Yes.
She loved her kids. She was devoted to her kids. So it's hard for me to reconcile this idea that she has no conscience, but with the fact that everyone reports that she was super devoted. What comes to my mind is she's supposed to be living the Mormon dream, divorce, 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 divorce.
Yeah.
Everything's
Right.
falling apart. Something snaps because her life's falling apart. Then you add the doctrine and the theology there, and that's what leads a desperate person to do desperate things. But
yeah,
what would your response be in response to the claim that she was a loving, devoted mother?
It's sort of the same thing I hear from, you know, when Jeffrey Dahmer's neighbor was interviewed, he said, oh, he was the nicest guy. You know, people aren't going to show you who they really are most of the time. You have to dig a little deeper, or you have to be in the right context. So I think her public persona was one of being a really loving, devoted mother, but her private persona, that's a different issue. You know, we know that that Tylee was hospitalized all the time, and we have some indications that there was probably some version of Munchausen's by proxy going on, which is an extreme form of objectifying kids. So,
what is
right,
that? What is that?
Munchausen's by proxy is, so it's not in the DSM-5. It's now called factitious disorder on another person, but it used to be called Munchausen's. I like using the term Munchausen's because it's cool. So forgive me for that. Like, you know, occasionally in our field we have to use terms that are cool.
And I think that Munchausen's is just more recognizable too.
It's more recognizable. It's old school.
Recognizable,
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
So it's essentially when a parent, typically a mother, will seek attention by poisoning or harming their children so that they have to go to the doctor. You know, they have to go to the hospital for visits. It's a very, it's fairly rare, but it's a very extreme type of mental illness. And we see some of this in Lori. So, you know, this notion that that she was this totally devoted, loving mother, you know, to me, that's a bit of a facade. It's sort of, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I want to say that I think Dr. John and I both agree that she tried to be. I think she wanted to live this Mormon fantasy lifestyle. She wanted to be a good mother. I think that was real. not every, personality disorder out there wants to, lead a, criminal life. I think she wanted to be normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think she really did want to love her husbands and love her kids, and if there was a moment there freezing, I think she really wanted to love her husbands and her kids. But in some ways she was incapable of it as much as she tried. I mean, there's something sad about this story too, obviously. As much as she wanted that, she found herself unable to perform or to do that, to follow through. And so, and
that would cause depression too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think she probably had some depression. I think she's struggling with that now in the mental hospital. If I'm right about some of the psychopathy, psychopaths struggle with what are called distress emotions. Distress emotions are fear and sadness. If you don't feel sadness or fear, it's really hard to connect with other human beings. So, we all of us with kids know that our kids are afraid and sad at times. And how do we connect to them if we don't feel those things? Right. So I think she wanted to. I think that's the tragedy here. I think she really, really, really wanted to have a stable life with stable marriages and kids that she could love. But I just think she couldn't get the job done. And so Daybell,
I'm sure her upbringing didn't help, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And Daybell is sort of to us like her last ditch effort to create to make this fantasy real, to bring it to life.
So what do we know about how they met and then how their relationship developed once they met?
So let's use the word allegedly. That's our word for today, because what we know, allegedly, they met in St. George, Utah at a Preparing a People conference where Chad was the speaker in October of 2000. Thank you. End of October 2018.
Yeah.
So shortly after this testimony meeting.
Just 3 years ago.
Yeah. And that we know that through her friend Melanie Gibb. Melanie Gibb has stated that is where they met. We've all speculated that it might have been earlier, but no one can prove that. And the reason we speculate is 3 days after they supposedly met at this conference, Chad's emailing Lori and telling her that her daughter Tylee Ryan is dark. So it seems like quite a rushed relationship, right? Where you go from meeting and 3 days later letting her know that, hey, by the way, your daughter is evil. So,
and that's coming from Chad, right?
That's coming from Chad to Lori, and that's the timeline we have. They met in St. George, Utah, allegedly at a Preparing a People conference where Chad was a speaker. We have the speech he gave on our YouTube channel that was given to us.
And Chad was an active Mormon, right?
Chad was an active Mormon. Lori was an active Mormon.
Both of them were
married. Married to their other spouses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There were no excommunications that we know of until after Chad was in the news. So they were active. They went every week.
So if a prophet, seer, and revelator was going to have a revelation or see ahead, this would have been a good type of thing, maybe for a prophet or seer or revelator to sort of say, whoa, this Preparing a People thing is becoming a problem. Let's tell all the members to stop it. Let's cease these conferences. Let's shut this all down. That this might have been a time for that to happen. Okay, keep going.
Right. So they were active Mormons. And so at this Preparing a People conference, they met after his speech. They hit it off. And 3 days later, we have an email that's been released that Chad sent Lori her family history, just like you saw with Destin Thane. It was Lori's family history, and he listed all of her past husbands, her now husband, all of her children,
her past lives, and her past
all of her past lives, who she was, how light she was, all of her siblings, and that husband that she had wanted to murder, who is dead. He was dark and sealed away. Chad let her know, and Tylee Ryan was also rated very dark, about the same darkness as her ex. And it was, I told you that she had a scale of like, you can't go back. Tylee Ryan was at a place where there was no going back. She was that evil, her 16-year-old daughter.
Tell me if I'm possibly filling in the dots right. Maybe She's somehow alone with Chad. He pulls out his necklace. He's doing his little his
Pendulum
spiritual
thing.
divination thing. Maybe Lori's kids are around. Maybe Lori would have talked to him about her frustrations with her husband. And in some combination of Lori either expressing frustration about her husband or her kids, or Chad having exposure to the kids, then Chad comes up with the idea that all these people around her are dark.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure that his pickup line was, "We were married in a past life." You know,
So
that was
just
his
like,
MO, you
just
know.
like Joel,
Mhm.
he's thinking, wow, she's hot.
Yep.
We must have been married in a past life.
Right.
So I'm going to use my foot zoning or my necklace,
My pendulum.
to groom her. Or he really believed it at this point. Maybe he's a pious fraud where he's like, wow, I'm feeling these feelings for you. It must be we were in a past life.
Right.
And that's when the sexuality starts to be entered into it. Right.
Right. And he also stated she had been married to Moroni in a past life. And allegedly Moroni gave his, that's for another time. But yes.
Do we know who Chad thinks he was in prior lives? Do we know his lineage?
Off the top of my head.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I feel like we do, but I know.
But Lori was married to Moroni. That's pretty prestigious.
Oh yeah.
Yes, and they were.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Moroni gave his sealing to Chad. Essentially, Moroni gave her away when they got married.
Oh, that's right.
Wow.
That's right.
That's a privilege.
I'm just gonna
Best man. Moroni was
back,
best man,
yeah,
basically.
Loop back. Yep. Loop back to what Dr. John was saying, where I think that Lori was just so ripe to just like absorb anything that Chad was telling her because she'd had this fantasy of him built up. I'm glad that you mentioned that, Dr. John, because I was kind of picturing them just kind of having this connection at the 2018 thing. But she has this long history of gaining a testimony of him and his powers. And so I think that it was just this perfect storm for them to just have this instant connection. And I'm sure that Chad loved that this beautiful, cheerleader type girl, woman was just so fascinated and absorbing all of the things that he was saying. I'm not surprised at all that they had an immediate connection to the point that maybe within a matter of days, he's telling her pretty serious, things about her child, and she's believing it.
Right. And he loved that she was a cheerleader. So thanks for pointing that out. He had said to somebody that she was hot and loaded.
Oh, okay.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the other side, is that Chad had this fantasy of somebody like Lori that he would meet and eventually marry. He talked about the two parts of his life. Right. He talked about that with Julie Rowe. He talked about that a lot, that he envisioned that Tammy would die at some point and he would have the second part of his life. And in that second half, he envisioned apparently the hot loaded cheerleader type. So,
yeah. And that I was going to ask you guys about that, because if you put on your kind of high school stereotypical brain and you think about who Chad was in high school,
right,
you don't think about a guy like Chad ending up with the cheerleader.
Right.
What's the missing element in the equation? It's the power.
That he had over her.
Power.
Yes. And so many people that have been looking at this story on the outside, like, how did those two even end up together? But I think it's just the power, the spiritual power
if you understand it, right? If you really understand her history and his history and the power that he said he claimed he had over other people.
I want to talk really quickly about how many people knew or had heard Chad and or Julie say that Tammy was going to die. I have such issue with that. Like,
so many.
Did Tammy ever know that all these people were talking about her dying? I'm so sad about that.
Can I set that up really quick?
Please,
okay, so
please.
if we go back to our slide about Eric and Chad's second and third tier Mormon, I should put Mormon. I'm going to edit the slide right now and put kind of Mormon theologies, right? Basically, we've already talked about multiple probations, evil and dark, and zombies. Now we've got polygamy introduced. And of course, if all these people are meeting and developing emotional intimacy and even sexual intimacy without their spouses present, all of a sudden those spouses become really inconvenient. Because if Chad wants to make it with Lori, he's still got Tammy that he's got to figure out. And so what emerges, Mindy, what you're alluding to, well, there's got to be can't just be Joseph Smith sleeping with 40 women. There's got to be a revelation. And so because all these people are talking to God and talking to Jesus, what's the revelation? And Julie Rowe and Chad Daybell and others in their circle, it was multiple people, start getting revelations that their spouses, not only that their spouses are going to die, but also they're starting to get revelations. They're supposed to get insurance policies on their spouses that are about to die. Okay. And now, Mindy, I just wanted to set that up.
Yeah, we'll just keep going with that.
Okay. And so how many people?
So Tammy wasn't the only spouse that was predicted.
No, we know that Jeff Rowe, who's now Julie Rowe's ex-husband, he was expected to die. We know that from multiple people. We know that Joel Gervine, his wife, was supposed to die. We mentioned Joe earlier as Julie Rowe's bodyguard.
All the people not in these circles are dying, right? Are supposed
Chad
to die.
Daybell's Tammy was supposed to die, and several people have said, yes, we heard him talk about that a lot, that she was going to die. I think he started talking about that around the time of Julie Rowe, by the way, and we do suspect that there was, something with Julie Rowe, and maybe, he thought
really claim that
it was going to be Julie for a little bit, until Lori came along. That's speculating, but with evidence, but some evidence. But a lot of these spouses were supposed to die.
Wow.
And then if you add to that the Nephi-Laban sort of justification of murder, you have all the elements for murder taking place.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if with an evil dark spirit entering a body, and
multiple probations,
you need to free them
evil
from that.
Zombies, infidelity, polygamy.
That's how they frame it, is they're going to free this person that they love.
It's an act of love.
From this
an act of
love.
love.
From this possession, or from living their existence as a dark soul. Why don't we accelerate that process? Oh, it's tragic.
Yeah. So anything you guys want to mention about how Lori and how they get from Lori getting her lineage and Lori and Chad developing feelings for each other, take us to then, if it's okay, just I guess to the murders. How do we take us from point A to point B?
There's so much in between, but yeah.
Well, it was fast though. I think that Lori, I should have Dr. John talk about this, but Lori's an impulsive, action-oriented woman. I wouldn't call Chad action-oriented. In fact, for many people, he was lazy. I think the combination of these two fast-forwarded everything, if that makes sense. Dr. John?
Yeah, I agree. Lori was clearly more of the doer, and Chad was more of the visionary. And I think, Lori really wanted something to happen. She wanted to obtain this power that Chad, as a goddess in the New Jerusalem, was promising. And so she wanted action. I actually sometimes use the analogy of Shakespeare's Macbeth, that I in some ways I see this as very similar to Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, in the sense that Macbeth sees the witches and he comes back home and he says, hey, the witches told me that I'm going to be king, but I don't think I can do it. And basically Lady Macbeth says to him, well, you better do it, because you need to be king. So it's a similar kind of dynamic, I think, where I don't think Macbeth kills the king unless Lady Macbeth kind of pushes him in that direction. And I think you have something similar here with Chad and Lori, that she's really spurring him on to action.
It's his belief system. He's the visionary. He's the one that's saying your kids can't be part of this gathering effort. Your daughter's dark, but it's Lori who's saying, well, show me something.
Well, again, in Macbeth, Macbeth encounters the three witches, which are the paranormal. They represent the paranormal, and they're the ones with the vision of his future, just like Chad. Chad has the vision. Macbeth brings it home. Lady Macbeth basically says to him, do something. In fact, she kind of threatens him and says, if you don't do something, you're not a man. So I think you have something similar. I don't know if Lori would have said it that directly, but I think there's kind of this challenge to his masculinity or his power, or however you want to see it. I think there's definitely something like that going on in that relationship.
Yeah. And so Chad doesn't want to lose the cheerleader.
Mm-mm.
She's saying, put up or shut up on all your prophecies and,
Yes.
all the implications. And that's
Yeah.
like a match to the kindred,
Yes.
match to the wood. What is it? Help me out.
Kindling.
Kindling.
A match to the gasoline can.
So Lori's the match
Yeah, that's
to
more like
the-
it, Lauren.
to the gasoline.
The
Okay.
spark with the powder keg.
Yeah.
All right.
To the
You guys are
dynamite.
bailing me out
A
of my
very
failed metaphor.
combustible combination, those two.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it goes. So what happens? Just give us like an abbreviated timeline of they start dating, I guess. Do they start dating and hanging out?
They start dating. They're having an affair.
Yeah.
There's a preparing a people conference in Mesa, Arizona, where Lori is hosting. Charles Vallow, her husband, is out of town. Lori's hosting this event, and all of these preppers are staying at her house, because that's what Mormons do. We don't stay in hotels. We stay at people's houses. And so they're all over there hanging out, and Chad is there. So Charles is out of town. Chad's hanging out. He's got his pendulum out. We have photos from that moment, this fancy home in Arizona, and he's hanging out with all these women. And I'm sure, he was showing them all his pendulum at that supposed. So we've seen those photos. Yes, exactly. And we've seen the photos of this event. And we've later heard that at this event, Chad and Lori, while both married, go to the Mesa temple, and they go to a separate sealing room, and they get sealed. That
They're both temple worthy.
Yes.
They're both super
they're
temple worthy.
temple worthy. They go to the temple, both married. I want to emphasize that because they're both still married. Here's polygamy for you. And they are sealed in a separate room. Jesus Christ is a witness. Moroni
They're
gets
like running
Lori
around.
away.
They're like running around the temple somewhere, going off to a corner.
Yeah,
of
they
this-
found some
an open
corner.
room.
Yeah.
I
or-
doubt they found someone to seal them, so I'm sure it was their own little place they discovered. Yes.
But Jesus, you said Jesus sealed
was
them?
he was a witness.
Jesus was a witness.
Oh,
Yeah. I'm not sure who officiated
probably
that.
Moroni.
I don't know who officiated either. We can't figure that out. But Moroni gave Lori away, like his sealing powers to Chad. So essentially.
And by the way, do we think that they believe that angelic visitors sealed them and were witnesses? Because, that speaks to how did the Book of Mormon 3 witnesses really believe, or the 8 witnesses? Do we think that they really believed that angels were sealing them?
I think this has been the question since this case.
I
we've gone
think
back and
so.
forth. I'm right now today. I think they believed it.
I think they believed it.
They believed it. I
you
think
go.
they believed it.
Yeah.
Dr.
They
John.
believed it.
Last word.
Yeah, last word.
Yeah, they believed it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
that
then,
was a big moment. So now they're married to each other while being married to other spouses.
Mhm.
So then and Chad at this point has already declared Tylee dark as a dark spirit. She's evil. And then
maybe because she doesn't like him, or she, is loyal to her dad, or I would guess.
I can't imagine being Tylee Ryan, a 16-year-old trying to deal with her mother and the situation she's been put in. And I'm sure that it was, she's growing up, and I think she was definitely smarter than all of them. I'll say that. I've read some of Tylee's writings and seen some of her work. I think she was definitely smarter than her mother, and I'm sure that she was struggling with
She's
a lot.
If I stay with the Shakespeare analogies, she's like the fool or the jester in Shakespeare. She's like the truth teller. She
Right.
actually tells her mother what she thinks of Chad, and that she thinks he's a fraud. And so usually the fool can get away with it in Shakespeare because he's kind of this moronic character, or he's seen as someone not to be taken seriously. But Tylee can't get away with that.
Yeah.
So
Right. She saw it for what it was.
she saw everything for what it was, and I think she was not a fan of Chad's. She pushed back against Chad, and that was not we know from speaking to several people that you did not question Chad. In fact, Girl on Fire talks about that when she started asking questions to Chad, he shut her down right away. So you could imagine a rebellious teenager in Chad's life pushing back and asking questions and telling her mom, "Look, Mom, what are you doing?" That was not a popular position to have.
We know that Tylee was sassy, and I'm sure that did not, I'm sure that Chad Daybell did not like or know how to handle a sassy young
Yeah.
woman, you know.
Nor
So-
did he want a sassy teenager in his life.
Right. But then I think one thing that really important then happened is after this, they're still in the temple. Chad lets Lori know that her husband, Charles Vallow, is now a zombie named Ned Snyder. And that is really important and puts the whole murderous rampage into play. Chad says, your husband is no longer your husband. He's been taken over by a demon, Ned Snyder. Charles is well aware of this. Lori's telling him this.
About all of this stuff.
He's seeking help. He's saying he's trying to have an intervention. I don't know, we need to get her assessed in a mental hospital. I'm concerned. She says she's going to destroy me. He calls police. He tries to tell the family. Like Charles, I mean, gosh, this guy, you see so much body cam footage, conversations with family, letters to attorneys. Like, I'm afraid for my life. She's going to kill me. And we need to help my wife. We need to help my wife. And nobody listened. And Charles was killed by someone we haven't mentioned yet, which is Lori Vallow Daybell's brother, Alex Cox. And Alex Cox was another one that we really believed it.
How did he get looped in?
Well, I mentioned him a little bit earlier. He's always been really loyal to Lori his whole life. And his brother, their other brother, says that he was kind of had a lot of potential, but was kind of lazy and, never really did much with his life. Didn't get married until like right before he died and didn't have children. And so he kind of got looped into this, feeling special by Chad. And I think I mentioned earlier, like Chad told him he was the angel that appeared to like intervene when Nephi was getting beat up in the Book of Mormon by his brothers. And so he kind of I believe Chad gave Alex a blessing to tell him that he needed to be their protector and like their warrior, and he and Lori's protector. So he, all of a sudden had meaning and purpose. He'd always had this strong loyalty to Lori and wanting to be there and to help her. And so, yes, he's a big part of, especially what happens with Charles. He's the one who supposedly kills Charles in self-defense, but now it's been ruled a homicide.
Right. And he likely killed the children too. So, so Alex is important in the sense that he believed it. He read near-death experience books too. He was Lori's older brother, and Lori claimed that he was her protector, and that's what Chad called him as well. And Lori, and he's who called 911 and said, I shot my brother-in-law, and claimed it was in self-defense.
Really, really quickly, I want to make two quick Mormon ties. Someone mentioned the second anointing in the comments. This idea of going off to a separate part of the temple and having a special ordinance is actually very Mormon. There's an ordinance in Mormonism called the second anointing. On Mormon Stories podcast, we've had two people, Tom Phillips and Hans and Brigitte Mattson, so it's three, all tell about their experiences going off to a special separate room in a Mormon temple and getting a celestial experience, which in Mormonism involves potentially seeing Jesus himself. So these are kind of these extra special Mormon experiences that happen in temples that can lay the groundwork for Chad and Lori feeling like they can go off to a separate part of the Mormon temple and have their own special experience. And then I just have to say, this idea of the Charles, you said warrior or protector, kind of that
Alex, a warrior.
Gosh dang it, I will never get the names right.
It's such a complicated. Yes, Alex was the protector warrior.
So Alex is there's a precedent in Mormon history for the Alex protector warrior character in Porter Rockwell. So Joseph Smith has a bodyguard named Porter Rockwell who tries to assassinate Lilburn Boggs, the governor of Missouri. I'm not making this up. This happens in the 1830s when the Mormons and the Missourians all start having problems. And so there's Porter Rockwell trying to assassinate the governor of Missouri, and there's these Danite characters, this special group of potentially violent followers of Joseph Smith, a secret group that act as protectors to Joseph Smith. So there is plenty of Mormon history precedent for prophets getting special
Being
anointing or
protected.
appointing special characters as bodyguards and or assassins, basically.
Interesting.
And I think that's maybe
Yeah.
part of how they could
Yeah.
anoint Lori's brother, whose name is
Alex.
I was going to say Charles. Alex
Oh, yeah.
as an assassin. Now, one thing you guys said that I didn't understand, for some originally I wondered if Alex had killed the children, but then I wondered if it was Chad. So do you guys want to talk about, and did the children die before Chad's wife?
Shortly before.
Okay.
Within like a month before.
Do you guys want to tell us your theory of how each of the deaths probably happened and when and where they happened? So Lori's husband dies first. Is that right?
In July.
That's the first death.
July 11th, 2019. Thank you. Yeah, July 11th, 2019. Charles
That's really
killed.
Alex in the home shooting.
Alex in the home claiming self-defense. Lori's now been charged in the murder. Alex is dead, but
Lori's charged in what? Alex
In
likely
conspiracy to murder Charles.
Okay.
I think that's her charges right now.
my point is Alex would probably be charged too, but he's dead. So
And then
he faced no charges ever. And then
Lori and her family quickly moved to Rexburg.
Correct.
After Charles dies.
Okay.
So she took JJ and Tylee to Rexburg. So Tylee was 16, JJ was 8. Colby stayed behind in Arizona because he was married, young family, and he just had a child. So Colby says he didn't even know where his mother moved. It was that fast. She just said, "I'm moving," and she moved to Rexburg and got herself a townhome. And then it was shortly after that, at the beginning of September, that Tylee Ryan disappeared. But we know now she was murdered and buried in Chad Daybell's yard.
So was that the trip to Yellowstone, or like, do we have an idea of when and how they might have died, and then when and how they might have gotten buried, and who was
There are a
involved?
lot of theories, and I do not know. I don't think Dr. John and either of us know the cause of Tylee's death yet. We don't know that. And it's been speculated who did it. I suspect it was Alex. I'm just speaking for me. Other theories going around the internet are that maybe right after the Yellowstone trip, she was dropped off at Chad's house. So there are a lot of theories out there. I'm sure we'll all know one day, but this is some tight information that we have not been privy to.
Right.
Okay.
I believe the Yellowstone photos are like
It's the last photo. She was killed. Yeah.
In the, very short time.
Do both of the kids go to Yellowstone?
Yes.
Yes. And there's a picture, a beautiful photo of Tylee wrapping her arms around JJ, almost, in this protective embrace. And they take a picture of them together at Yellowstone.
Who goes to Yellowstone? Who goes to Yellowstone?
Lori, Alex, Tylee, and JJ.
Not Chad.
We don't know.
He's not. Yeah.
He's not in the pictures, and he didn't go in the same car, but was he there? I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, so they go to Yellowstone. At least Alex and Lori with the kids.
Yes.
Right.
And
the
then
next morning, Tylee's being buried in Chad's yard.
The next morning.
There's pings on Alex's phone in Chad's yard, and
right.
And,
or no, that might have been.
And is there a sense that the two kids died at the same time or
No.
different times?
No, different. Go ahead, Lauren.
Tylee was the first. No, go ahead, Mindy.
I
No,
can't remember the exact dates, but it's within a few weeks after.
JJ died last week when we did the first podcast. That was JJ's 2 years since his death. It was September 22nd, I believe, is when. So it was a couple of weeks later, and it was really, oddly, they had guests in town during JJ's death. They had just recorded a podcast that night, Fill the Fire, with Melanie Gibb and her boyfriend David Warwick, preppers. And then the next morning they said, well, we want to say goodbye to JJ. And they're like, oh, he's not here. And he was being buried in Chad Daybell's yard. That's their last picture.
So this is a picture of who?
JJ, Tylee, and Alex behind them. Alex Cox, who is likely their killer.
Likely.
So maybe it's like, let's take them to Yellowstone and take care of them. I mean, that's a possible.
Like one last
trip, and maybe there'll be an accident, or maybe who knows what. Yeah. Okay. So Tylee dies first. She had already been declared as dark.
She'd been declared as dark, and we know now that she'd been declared as a zombie.
Okay.
So, I mean, how do you escape that? You're not only evil and dark, you're now a zombie. I mean, the girl didn't have a chance. So,
Buried
with
in
this belief
Chad.
system.
She's buried in, which connects Chad. She's buried in Chad's
yard. And the day she was buried, and the Alex's phone pinged in Chad's yard the day after the Yellowstone trip. Chad writes a text to Tammy, his wife, who's still alive, and his wife, and said, "I've burned some limbs in the yard. I shot a raccoon, a huge raccoon. I burned a bunch of the limbs. He used the word limbs, but I shot a big raccoon. I burned a bunch of limbs. And, it's an odd text." And then she just responds, "Good for you."
So
yeah, the timing of that. Same day. Tylee, yes.
So that's the second death.
After Charles, second death.
Yes.
First Charles in Arizona, then Tylee in Rexburg.
Okay, and then the next death.
So on July 22nd, when Melanie Gibb and David Warwick are visiting, and they're recording a Fill the Fire podcast in Lori's townhome.
September.
Oh, thank you. I don't know what I said, but thank you for correcting me. September 22nd and 2019, and Lori is saying that JJ is a zombie to Melanie Gibb. So she's stating that, look, he's a zombie. Also, JJ was autistic. He was a rambunctious little 7-year-old boy, but he was a zombie to his mother.
And so do we know when he dies?
That night or that morning. I mean, I don't know if it was that night or that morning, but he was buried. Alex's phone pings in Chad Daybell's yard the next morning, and Melanie Gibb and David Warwick ask, "Where's JJ?" before they leave town, and they say he's with Alex, and they don't see him. And he's buried in the same pajamas he was wearing that Melanie Gibb
took a photo of him
in, that morning. And those are the pajamas he's buried in.
So that's
with duct tape all around his body, including his mouth and his arms connected in duct tape.
Okay. Then who's next? And then Tammy's next?
And then Tammy is next. And we know now that Tammy was considered a zombie named Viola.
By who? By Chad?
By Chad and Lori. I'm sure it was Chad that told her. According to our sources, Chad is telling Lori that Tammy's now a zombie. So she is killed in October of 2019. I don't know the exact.
Do we know if she was killed or if it was just reported as her passing away?
Allegedly killed right now, Chad Daybell, and only Chad Daybell, not Lori. Only Chad Daybell is charged in her death. Lori was allegedly in Hawaii when she died, but it is been so Chad has been charged with Tammy's homicide in her murder.
So it's almost like, Lori says, "Hey, I took care of my family. Now you take care of yours." She goes off to Hawaii. Chad potentially kills
Tammy.
And Alex was parked down the block in the church parking lot the night.
Yeah.
Tammy
remember
died.
there was a church parking lot ping, and it was the night that
Tammy died, and Alex was there.
So
Alex was in the
could have
visit.
been
His phone was there.
We could have helped. Yeah.
It could have been Alex. And then, but her body wasn't disposed of, right?
No. Chad called to his son Garth, and Garth ran into the bedroom, and Tammy was half on the bed, half on the floor. And Garth says that he realized his mother was dead, and they waited quite a few hours and then called 911 in the morning.
And then Alex.
Yes, in December of 2019.
Alex marries a prepper named Zulema. She can control the elements like the weather, supposedly. Chad Daybell, allegedly, it was an arranged marriage by Chad. And then 2 weeks after that marriage, a 911 call from Zulema's son says, my mom's boyfriend, that's what he called her boyfriend, is not well. He's on the floor, foam coming out. I need help. And he dies. And that was ruled a pulmonary embolism by the in the autopsy. But I mean, we have our own beliefs there.
What let's just say, what are the rumors about what might have happened to Alex?
Maybe a suicide. He did. This is fact. Before his death, he received a blessing from Chad over the phone. Chad was in Hawaii with Lori, and there was a conversation, and he received a blessing from Chad Daybell because he was allegedly not feeling well. That's why the blessing happened. I'm going to speculate. Here's Lauren's theory. I'm not even going to say it's Dr. John's theory. This is Lauren's theory that Chad gave him a blessing to release himself, and that Alex did something to end his life. That's my theory. Nobody else.
Another possibility could be that Chad or Lori wanted to get rid of the one witness.
Another theory could be they declared him a zombie, and maybe his wife Zulema did something to him. Right? There are several theories, and I want to reiterate these are all theories. And the autopsy result simply says pulmonary embolism.
Mm-mm.
Wow.
Well, we have a clip of one of the FBI. Is it an FBI investigator talking about kind of some of the more gruesome details? I want to give a warning. It is a disturbing account of uncovering some of the remains. Dr. John, is there anything you want to say in advance of us kind of playing this one clip?
My only thought would be that in the profiling world, profilers sometimes talk about what are called signatures, and signatures are kind of the unique imprint that a person will put on a body, or in terms of the murder, in terms of how the body is found or the state of the body. And so I think you're seeing a little bit of that here. I think that you're seeing a little bit of a signature based on the state of the bodies.
And when you say in the body, what we're going to hear now is about Tylee Ryan's body. And yes, thank you. This is a disclaimer warning. It's disturbing. And this is during Chad Daybell's preliminary hearing. So that's important. And this is someone that was on the scene. I believe it was FBI helping to uncover these bodies that they had just discovered in Chad Daybell's yard just before they arrested Chad Daybell.
So this is FBI Special Agent Steve Daniels testifying at, like you said, at Chad Daybell's preliminary hearing. And Lauren and Dr. John, you tell us when to stop, okay? All right.
There's a story to be told here at this grave. So we want to do the same thing, layer by layer, noting any significance. The difficulty, I think, for us, for this one, was the way these human remains were found. So it was kind of this, for lack of a better term, it was kind of a mass of dismembered human remains. Burnt, partially burnt. And so we did the best we could. It was kind of hard to recognize, like, what are we looking at here initially? What is this? We know there's tissue here, there's organic matter here, and we just couldn't recognize what we were dealing with. But layer by layer, we ended up just excavating all around this mass of human remains. And we ended up excavating all the way around it. And at the very bottom of this mass, we find, this melted green bucket. And then to the bottom, the side of that green bucket, we eventually find a skull. And then to the side of that skull, we find a mandible with some teeth. Those are the significant things that you could finally see and recognize.
Okay.
Mass. And so
that was Tylee Ryan, this beautiful girl. I just want to show her face again. So
Just you can't even speak. It's just yeah.
yeah. But he's gifted. He can see beyond the veil.
So gifted.
So
Yeah.
gifted.
Yeah, it's just dark. Yeah. And then they go off to like Hawaii together and then to the sunset. Like, what are they thinking? Like I have to think, let's just assume the pious, that they really were sincere believers and that God wanted them to murder all these people. They go to Hawaii. What are they thinking? Do we know what they're thinking? Are they communicating with anyone? Is Jesus about to come and they're going to usher in Jesus? Like, what are they thinking? How is this going to end where nobody's, oh, by the way, there was a comment that was made about insurance that we wanted to invoke to just kind of talk about the fact that,
Okay, go down. You skipped it.
oh, sorry.
Right there.
Okay. So yeah, one of our viewers, George Washington Hayduke, says they needed him gone.
Oh, that's talking about Alex. It's above that.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Let's see. There was a comment about Tammy needing to be alive and her body to be felt so that maybe Chad could collect on insurance. And this is
insurance is a big part
this
of the
is a
story
big
as well,
part
right?
of this this whole story. Do we want to talk about, I mean, we talked about kind of the we talked about the second and third tiers. What we didn't include there is insurance, that in addition to prophesying deaths and justifying murder, we've got a lot of these people getting insurance policies on their spouses. Is that right?
Yes. Charles Vallow changed his insurance policy to his sister Kay Woodcock right before his death because it was clear to him that his life was in danger. And so Lori did not get it, and that made her very angry. So Kay Woodcock got the $1 million life insurance policy. So I'm sure that Chad and Lori weren't expecting that, but Chad upped Tammy's life insurance policy. So he got, what was it, Dr. John, about like 400,000?
450,000, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, from Tammy.
For Tammy. Chad got that for Tammy.
So they're going to Hawaii with a boatload of cash.
Right. So Lori didn't have anything in the end. His hot and loaded cheerleader ended up not getting the $1 million payout.
She was super mad about that, right?
Yes.
The insurance company, like with less than 48 hours after Charles was killed by her brother in her house.
To collect.
To collect. And then she was informed that it had been changed to Charles's sister, Kay, and she was very upset about that and let Kay know.
And Charles did that because he thought Kay would be able to take care of JJ because Lori was being a very distant mother at that point. And so he was worried about who would care for JJ. Clearly not Lori, and he was right.
Right.
We'd all listened to Charles Vallow.
Right.
So we know that they went to Hawaii. They got married on the beach less than 2 weeks after Tammy died. Tammy was buried quickly in another state. It took like 3 days to have her buried. They went off to Hawaii. We do know, according to Melanie Gibb and some friends, that they really did think that this was going to be the one where the, stuff hit the fan, and they were just going to play it out in Hawaii and then come back and no one was going to notice the missing kids. So they had this blissful beach wedding where they're smiling and playing the ukulele while 2 kids are buried in his yard.
There's a comment about Melanie Gibb. I don't know that I want to really read it per se, but it's basically saying that it's a viewer that's kind of really mad at Melanie, wondering if she's even somehow involved in any of this or knew or should have. Why are people expressing anger at Melanie Gibb? Can any of you guys fill that in?
Yeah, there's a recording. There are a few reasons. I mean, she was clearly best friends with Lori, but there's a recording of Melanie Gibb that was uncovered. She was recorded. It was a phone call in January of 2020 by a woman named Sherry Dottle. And I've interviewed Sherry Dottle, who recorded this on our YouTube channel, Hidden True Crime. And in it, she's essentially, I mean, maybe Dr. John can explain it, but she doesn't have a lot of empathy to the victims. She's saying that they knew that they planned to kill Charles, or that's implied. She calls JJ a drug baby. She says Tylee didn't like anyone. She speaks kindly of Chad and Lori and Alex. And it seems like she knew quite a lot. She tells a story of Charles coming to her crying and saying, help me, Lori's going to kill me. And she didn't do anything. So those are just a few things. I don't know if Dr. John wants to add his thoughts on Melanie Gibb, because we have talked a bit about her as a cult member and her belief system.
it is somewhat confusing. I mean, I think Lauren and I have always suspected that she knew a lot more than she's telling, but we don't know what law enforcement knows. I think there's probably a lot of, or at least some anger towards her, because there's some general belief that she knew way more than she's letting on, and that she probably could have done something, so possibly she could be culpable. So yeah, that statement is accurate. I think there's a lot of confusion about her role, and she hasn't been, entirely honest about everything either, so that doesn't help.
I mean, something that comes to my mind is if there's a circle of prepper, Mormons that believe in this third tier theology, and they're all getting prophecies that their spouses are going to die, and they're all believing that, and they're all getting insurance policies, then once people start dying, they've got to be like, whoa, fulfillment of prophecy. We got to be tight-lipped about it, but this is the Lord's prophecies coming to fulfillment.
Yeah.
So they would be in the know because they had all told each other their spouses were going to die, right? They all knew.
Right.
And again, Melanie Gibb was the one that was there in Rexburg recording a podcast with Lori the night JJ went missing in his red pajamas. So there's definitely speculation. But I think one thing, as you just pointed out, John DeLynn, that it shows how deep this belief system is. I think, if anything, Melanie Gibb was a believer.
Yeah.
She was in this
For sure.
belief system. That recording that we played of Lori Vallow sharing her testimony was at Melanie Gibb's home. She hosted these events.
When in your interview with Sherry Dowdell, which is the recording that she has a telephone call with Melanie Gibb, I would direct viewers and listeners to that. It's really super interesting. But one of the things that Melanie says so casually is, Sherry asks Melanie, weren't you afraid? Didn't you fear for your life? And Melanie says very casually, well, I want to say it correctly. I have it in my notes.
Yeah, you have it written down. Say the quote, because what you're saying is important.
She says, Sherry says to Melanie, aren't you afraid? And Melanie says, well, I'm not distracting from their mission of being together, so they have no reason to pop me off.
And what does that mean?
I think that shows that Melanie knew that
what the motive was
happening. Yes. And the motive,
why people were being killed.
Right. And she just says it so casually that she was. So I think she's such an interesting and crucial part of the story. I do think that she knew a lot, and I think that she could have prevented some of or all of these deaths.
And rumor has it she's still gathering. She's still religious. I don't know of any excommunication with her at all. I know that she's, she thinks that they were deceived. Chad and Lori were deceived. But there's
a few interesting comments coming in that I think are worth mentioning. Marcella Abel writes, they also probably wanted Melanie P to get Brandon's insurance, and she would donate her insurance money to their cause. But thank God Alex was a terrible shot. Do you want to tell us what Marcella is saying there?
Yes, that's important too. When we say that this story needs a chart and like a diagram, this is why. So Brandon Boudreaux, he was, do you know when that drive-by shooting was, Mindy? But it was after Charles was killed. I think it was in October. So around the same month that Tammy died.
Brandon Boudreaux, they're gone.
Yeah. Okay. So it was October, around the month Tammy died. Brandon Boudreaux is in Arizona, and he is married to Melanie. It was Melanie Boudreaux then. It's now Melanie Pulowski, Lori Vallow Daybell's niece. And Brandon and Melanie were separated. So now we have two Melanies. This is Melanie, the niece Melanie we're talking about. We've switched directions here. Melanie without knee. Melanie moved to Rexburg and was divorcing Brandon to be with Lori and this part of this belief system. She was fully invested in this belief system. She left her children even. Brandon, her soon-to-be ex-husband, but still husband, is with his children and working, and he drives up to his home after work, and someone shoots at him from a green Jeep that Tylee used to drive, and that's registered to Charles Vallow, and misses him by just inches. And he ends up having to go in hiding. He had a huge life insurance policy that, wasn't going to be part of Melanie Pulowski's life if they were divorced. So this happened right before the divorce was finalized. And he's lucky to still be alive. That is still under investigation. Nobody's been charged with that crime. We believe it was Alex who shot at him. And so we believe that, yeah, they're right. Alex was a poor shot, luckily. And to get a bit of that story, I've interviewed Brandon Boudreaux and Melanie Pulowski's very close friend, Jess, on our YouTube channel, Hidden True Crime. So if someone wants to go down that rabbit hole to understand that investigation, Jess is a really important interview in understanding that. She was very close with Melanie and watched Melanie Pulowski get sucked into this cult, and her story is extremely compelling.
I agree.
A couple other comments from viewers. Abigail Parker writes, Lori Gibb said she knew when they called the children zombies that they would be killed. She said that herself in the phone call. So
I
we've
think
got
she means to say Melanie
Gibb. Yeah. So again, the phone, she's right. The phone call that you have to realize is in January of 2020. So there's a little bit of hindsight bias. At this point, Melanie Gibb is talking to police. And so she is relaying to Sherry Dottle her hindsight thoughts, right? Like, well, yeah, they were killed because they're zombies. But I think the point is she could have known that what was about to happen to zombies. And yeah, she's absolutely right. Thank you, for saying that. Yeah.
And Abigail also says that
it's an important interview or phone recording.
And this may be repeating things Abigail's saying, that Melanie said after the children went missing, she had the gut feeling that they were dead, and it still took her months to go to the police.
Absolutely.
Wow.
She did say that.
Not a lot of love for Melanie Gibb in her.
She did say that. Yeah. And this Sherry Dottle, I have to say, the one that recorded this, I have to commend her.
Yes.
She's a woman in Massachusetts who admired Melanie Gibb and was sort of dipping her feet into the prepper movement, read Melanie Gibb's book. So she was sort of fangirling Melanie Gibb at the time and had never talked to her on the phone, but would write her and was just kind of, oh, Melanie Gibb. And so then when she saw Lori and Chad on the news, she reached out to her internet friend, Melanie Gibb, and said, hey, aren't these your friends? And she said, can you call me? So the first phone call they ever had, Melanie's telling her, this poor woman in Massachusetts, about zombies and all these killings. And Sherry Dottle was so shocked. She whipped out her iPad and started recording her. And that's the recording that was released. And I interviewed Sherry about what she was thinking. And she is just fascinating, that interview too. Like, she couldn't believe what she was hearing. And Melanie Gibb seemed so detached, which I think is a sign of maybe a cult member too, just like she seemed so detached from what she's telling this woman who was so shocked.
Interesting.
I have a dear friend named Stephen Eliason, who's a pathologist. Hey, Stephen. He appeared also in a way on the last episode as well. He writes, pulmonary embolism could be either a strong definitive finding or basically a guess if you don't find much. This should be clear in a good autopsy report. You're nodding your head, Lauren and Mindy. You said, what do you guys think? Why? Thank you, Steve.
I just think there's more to it. I just think there's more to it.
It's the timing's just too convenient. So,
yeah. Okay. So much here. We've got a couple quick little quick excerpts of people like we're going to talk about Julie Rowe in just a second. But we've got this first clip is Sherry Dowdle talking about how Tammy died in the zombie thing. Should we share that clip really quick?
Yeah, so this is the recording we're talking about. It's not Sherry Dowdle. Well, you'll hear her gasps, but it's the recorded phone call we were just discussing. It's Melanie Gibb talking to Sherry Dowdle about Tammy's death, and Sherry Dowdle's gasping and asking questions, but it's Melanie, the narrator, if that makes sense.
Okay, so this is Melanie. Okay, and you, Lauren, we'll ask you to tell us when to stop the clip. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So I'm in so much shock. And then she also talked about Tammy. She talked about Tammy. She said she was supposed to die in a car accident, but she didn't die in a car accident. And so she said, oh, we just had to do whatever we had to do to pray to get her spirit. Lori said to her, we had to do whatever we had to do to get her spirit to get her out of her spirit, which she probably meant get her spirit out of her body.
And so, and I said, well, how did she die? She goes, well, we just had to do what we could to take her out of her spirit, something like that.
She said that Tammy had gotten right before they killed her, a couple weeks before they killed her, that she was starting to question and thought that there's something going on between her and Chad Daybell. That's what Melanie Gibbs says on this conversation. But she claims that she didn't know she was dead, and then Lori called her and told her that she had died or whatever, and she didn't hear about it because she doesn't watch TV or something. And
then I call her in Hawaii and I say, hey, guess what? Do you know Tammy just died? Do you know this? And she goes, no, I haven't heard it yet. And and I said, well, what happened? What happened to Tammy? And she goes, well, she was a zombie 2 weeks before she died. And I was like, really? She goes, yeah, she was starting to question our relationship. She was wondering if he was having an affair. I said, oh. So I'm thinking she said a prayer and her spirit went home. That's what I'm thinking, right? And so, like, maybe she did some kind of, like, blessing or something, you know, like people can do that, I guess. I don't know. And so anyway.
But for me, it was so shocking to me to hear about Tammy's death, Charles' death, and the kids. And she didn't say, oh, I know that he killed them, other than that they're dead, that they killed them, other than she said they're zombies. So, she did say when she went up there to do the podcast, she asked where Tylee was, and she said Tylee was at Idaho, BYU, Idaho. And she said, but she gave her this real creepy look, like, but you really know she's dead. This look on her face was this real creepy look.
I mentioned again, like, Tylee went to BYU, and she goes, yeah, but she gave me this really creepy look.
Oh.
Yeah, it was creepy. It was like, yes, she's dead, really, and you know, that kind of look.
Yeah.
Like, I think,
okay, that's good.
I'm in so much shock.
So, yeah, what reactions to that? And then, yeah.
I think it's just kind of along the lines of what we've been talking about with Melanie.
Yeah.
Just
to confirm all the commenters' feelings about her.
Talk about
Melanie's
these
voice,
events.
right? That was
That's
Melanie's
Melanie.
voice, yeah.
Just to talk about it just kind of so casually and kind of robotically, I found that just to be really disturbing.
And you know, there's a comment here that really is the whole central theme of the show. Sharon Tree writes, you cannot possibly believe that any church beliefs are part of these people's decisions. We're going to address that at the end, but I just want to make the point. Okay, maybe Chad Daybell was a psychopath or a murderer, had a disorder, but then you add Tammy, or then you add Lori. But then you add other people in their circle that kind of knew that deaths were either going to happen or were happening and felt like they were part of it. Once you start expanding that circle of people who are either planning it or knowing about it, you've also got Lori's brother. Mm-hmm. Are these all individually psychopath murderers, or is there something that brings them all together, uniting them in a collective belief that this is all how things should be progressing? What is the common ingredient? Are they all just coincidentally murdering psychopaths? Or is it a common shared set of beliefs, theological based Mormon and Christian beliefs?
Extreme.
That are extreme.
Yes.
But that's the foundation.
Right.
I mean, that's the question I think we're asking in this podcast. Lauren and Dr. John, anything you want to add to that, or?
Dr. John?
Well, I think, yeah, I think this has been kind of the point of the episodes we've done, is to really build to the point where these murders could make sense. And I hope that, I think, you know, John and Mindy, you guys have done a great job of laying out all the pieces and showing how that could be possible.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and show the Eric Smith clip now. Lauren, do you want to set that up? This is the Eric Smith clip about how Tammy died in zombies, I think, right?
Yeah, I think this is just a good continuing.
Okay.
Let's hear it and then talk.
Okay, and tell me when to stop again.
You mentioned that you don't believe in zombies. I did want to ask you a little bit about where you think that came up. I mean, there's two parts of zombies as far as I'm concerned. There's the term zombies, which is pretty crazy to me. But then there's the idea of a spirit, an evil spirit, being able to inhabit a a body that they weren't supposed to. So
right. Most of us would probably call that possession.
Possession. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because I would say most people say they don't believe in zombies, but the term is pretty crazy, right? Like we're talking like Walking Dead fantasy. So you would call it possession, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what the scriptures called it. I think the Savior spent most of his time going around casting out demons and unclean spirits from people.
So you would believe in this then, the possession or?
Sure. I believe an evil spirit can possess a body just because the New Testament makes it pretty clear that happened.
Okay. I mean, gosh, again, it goes back to this question of then, Chad and Lori justify their killings using sort of this idea. Yeah, they use the term zombies, but what zombies means is what possession is.
I don't know.
You can stop.
So let me pause here. And
Lauren, is that good?
Yeah, that's good.
That's so good, Laura. That's so brilliant. That was like a goal. That Oscar, like, what's the journal? Peabody? That was like a Peabody performance there.
I think there was a little tell there when you bit the bottom of your lip at the end.
Uh-oh. Don't marry a psychologist. They'll call you out on that. Yeah, because Eric's trying to say, the zombie stuff, that's crazy.
Yeah. That's tier 3. Don't mix that with my precious tier 2 beliefs.
I mean, yeah, I'm glad you played that. I wasn't sure actually what soundbite, because that's this entire case is where do these belief systems begin and end, and how many people believe beliefs that are potentially really dangerous, and can we see another Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow soon again?
Yes.
It's
frightening. And I think it's very relevant to talk about that.
Well, Julie Rowe's still alive.
Yeah.
And
people are still following her. And Eric, people are following him still.
And we're going to show just 3 quick clips with Julie Rowe, because again, Julie Rowe not only is still alive, she's still got a big following and she's still prophesying. And she was in the know on some of this, if not a lot of it.
Right.
So Lauren, is it okay if we show just a couple more quick clips and then we'll wrap up?
Absolutely.
Okay, so here is the clip of Julie Rowe admitting she knew Tammy was going to die. All right. And Lauren, you tell us when to stop this one, okay?
Okay.
All right.
The kids, let's get to the kids. Do you want to ask questions, or should I keep going? Because I'm on a tangent.
Just keep going. I did ask that question about the 2 children, which is, I think, is one of the big questions people have in their minds. Are they okay?
I am in such an uproar about the backstory being twisted and turned, and people not knowing, and they get all this fear and anxiety and manipulation and control and yada yada, and they believe the authorities and they believe the media when they should be actually listening to like what their heart tells them and get rid of their fear energy and maybe like ask your guardian angel. But we don't live in a world like that. The kids are safe.
That's good.
I have nothing to do with it. I don't know where they are. I have talked to their spirits. I have talked to Tammy's spirit. Tammy's spirit came and visited me the morning of my class in San Diego. And so,
okay. So that's really important. Lauren, Dr. John, Mindy, what do you guys want to say about that?
I'll give the background to that again. I've brought that podcast up a few times during this episode. That was December of 2019, just after Chad and Lori made the news. This is December 26th. Eric Smith and Julie Rowe get on, and Julie says the kids are safe. Later on in that interview, but it would take a bit to get there, she says, I know Chad Daybell's heart, and maybe you're about to play it, so I don't want to give it away. But
No, go ahead.
she says, I know Chad Daybell's heart, and Eric says, there's compelling evidence. Are you positive? And she says that they have nothing to do with this. And she said, I know they don't have anything to do with this. I know Chad Daybell's heart. They are innocent. And so she says, and then she explains that she sees the children on a beach in white, and they're safe and happy.
This would be a good one.
Yeah. So that's, again, bringing Julie Rowe back into it. But didn't in that clip she mentioned she knew Tammy was going to die? Or did I?
Yeah, several times in that clip. And it's a different part, but there are actually multiple points. I could even try to find you a time code if you wanted it right away. But several places in that she says, I know that Tammy was going to die. I saw it too. I would talk to Chad about it. I would grieve with him about the future death of Tammy. I would say to him, do you still see Tammy dying? He said, yes. I'm just not sure how it's going to happen. But Tammy, we've known Tammy was going to die for years, she says.
Just like Julie had predicted the death of her own husband.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gratefully, he's still alive, right?
Right.
Yes.
They got divorced.
They're divorced, yeah.
And don't forget the massive earthquakes up and down the Wasatch Front. We're still waiting.
She's got several failed prophecies, not unlike Joseph Smith and other millennialistic prophets. All Jehovah's Witnesses always prophesying the next disaster. The dates come and go, and there's always some sort of explanation. And for me, this is just the most unbelievable clip of all, which ties Chad and Lori to Julie, to an ongoing problem that the Mormon Church has and that we have living in Utah and Idaho and Arizona and elsewhere. This is Julie Rowe being called on the fact that she had said that the kids were safe and then realizing that the kids were dead, how she justified it. And for me, this is the most powerful clip of all.
One of the lies that keeps going around is the first podcast I did where I said that the kids were safe and Chad was innocent. You guys, I woke up to the truth right along with the media and everybody else. I did not know that Chad had deceived me the way he had right along with everyone else. I have gifts, but I am not perfect in them. I was told by Spirit Realm that the kids were safe, and I saw them in a beach house and on the beach. My gifts had not advanced to the point at that point that I could tell that was in Spirit Realm. Sometimes the dimensions look so real to me, they look like they're in real time in a physical setting, because that is how real my gifts are. I wasn't trying to deceive anyone. I did not know that they had passed to the other side. But I did do an interview with Nate Eaton the Friday before the Tuesday the news broke out that the bodies were found on Chad's property. And East Idaho News willingly chose not to air my video, where I came out publicly for over an hour telling Nate Eaton that Chad had killed the kids.
You can be done.
I have told media and FBI what I know. I have worked with the FBI. I have called the Rexburg Police Department and left messages. That's on them. I have done nothing but tell the truth. I have 46 contacts of media that I've talked to, and probably close to 200 hours of media that I have given information. And you guys have seen what the media has done with it. Very little. So I continue to take bullets in social media and from all kinds of people because they think, based on what the media's put out there, the little clips that I've said, that I was in cahoots with Chad Daybell, or that I was holding out, or that I knew something. This is bullshit. How's that feel?
I just want to play this in because it's
for
just too
all
good.
the judging Mormons out there, or anybody else that decides to judge me on this planet, Good riddance. When you get the plague, when the Russians come in, when there are earthquakes in your backyard, when your house falls off of East Mountain, when you are flooded in Saratoga Springs, when the Russians raid your house in Tucson, Arizona, Oro Valley to be specific. Good riddance. You will deserve what you have earned. Karma is a bitch and it's real.
I mean,
wow.
she is still out there, right? Like,
she absolutely is still out there,
and with thousands or tens of thousands of followers and believers.
Yep, thousands.
Her followers come out on our YouTube videos and say that we're spewing lies. Girl on Fire's interview was a big one. You know, that what you just played was after we interviewed Sean Little Bear, who claimed some things about Julie Rowe. She did that the next day, and she called us out. And you know, clearly she's angry. I wonder why. You know, the truth is coming out, but she's still out there, and her followers they're in abundance.
Yeah, and what we learned from the psychology literature, and Dr. John, I'm sure you've got something to say about this more robust than me, is that sometimes when a prophecy fails to come true, a leader can spin it in a way to where believers actually believe more after the prophecy fails to come true than they believed before. Is that right, Dr. John?
Yes. Yeah. Right. I mean, I think what she says here is that her gifts hadn't developed enough to the point where she could predict them. So what she's saying is that now they have. So don't leave me. I'm all in, and guess what? I'm even better. I'm more accurate. So
even better.
So climb on board and take the journey.
Better.
Right. I'm even better. Yeah. So, right. So that would be an example of a failed prophecy, you know, or a failed cult leader, whatever we want to call her, trying to justify something that didn't work, and appeal to her followers to continue to believe, or as you say, to believe even stronger than they had previously.
And it's so disturbing because now she's using fear, you know, in a cult, it's the bite model, behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions. Mm-hmm. She's clearly using fear of like East
the
Bench.
Russians are coming.
The Russians are coming. Mesa, the Russians are going to invade you. Your houses are going to fall off mountains and plagues. And she's using fear to stoke this same sort of prepper anxiety about the coming of Jesus and the apocalypse. She's now stoking it even more than she ever has, which is just going to help her get more followers.
And then using karma, right? If you don't believe me, watch out for karma.
Watch out.
You know, karma's going to get you if you don't follow me. So, and good riddance to you if you don't follow me.
Yeah. So I guess I've got a couple summary slides again that kind of summarizes the tie, the very explicit tie between Christianity and Mormonism and this case. But Lauren and Dr. John, I want to give you guys a chance to summarize before I make a final summary.
To summarize this case?
just
we're still summarizing it, but I think somebody asked a great question for Dr. John, and I saw it, and they wanted to know why everyone was so enthralled with this case. And for some reason, it feels like that might allow a transition to a great summary of what this case is. I don't know if that's something Dr. John wants to mention, or if you want to go a completely different direction, but I thought that was great. Like, what is this case? What is this? That's something Keith Morrison said. He said he's never seen anything like this in an interview with East Idaho. He goes, what is this? What is this thing? You know, Keith Morrison, Dateline host, you know, has done crimes his whole life, and he's been blown away himself by this.
Wow.
But
I mean, that's a really that's a really involved answer. I mean, because there's so many components. But for me, I think I could sum it up fairly simply. I can't say what specifically, but I'm going to be in a documentary coming up early next year. I can't speak more about specifics, but towards the end of that, the director asked me, she said, "What is this all about? What's going on here?" And this kind of alludes to some things you were talking about earlier, John. But, if I had to sum it up, I would say this is about the fact that human beings really struggle to accept the fact that we're human. We're nothing more. We're nothing less. We're human. We have limits. We're vulnerable. We're human beings. That's what we are. I think that, many people have a hard time with that notion that they want to be more than human. They want to be divine. They want to be prophets. They want to be gods, right? Like Chad Daybell, like Lori. And then, I deal with the other side. I deal with people that sometimes are less than human. They kill others. They resort to the most malicious, barbaric behavior imaginable. And maybe that's not human either. So it's somewhere in between, right? So I think in the end, this is about, the craziness of humans, just the tremendous struggles that we have to accept our limitations and to accept what that means. And sometimes I think the hardest thing for humans to do is just to accept what's in front of us, just to know our limitations, to love the people in front of us, and to see that as enough. Last year we took our little boy to the Grand Canyon, and he was just awestruck. He said, "Dad, it's so pretty." And I thought, that's enough. We don't need more than that. How can we not be awestruck by the Grand Canyon and by my little boy in front of me and by my amazing wife? Like, what more do I need? I don't need to be a god. And I don't need to harm others either. I don't need to be barbaric. I don't need to have rage. I just need to love and accept what's in front of me. So I hate to go on a little bit of a soapbox, but to me, that's what this is about. This is about humans that just can't accept what's in front of them. And even though the things in front of them are the most amazing things imaginable, they have to create something. They want something more. They want something they can't have. They live in this fictional world. So that's how I think I would sum it up.
So powerful.
Well said.
So
Thank
powerful.
you, Dr. John and Lauren.
Lauren, do
So
you want to add anything to that, Lauren? That was so beautiful. Thank you, Dr. John.
Yeah, it was. Thank you, Dr. John. It's a little bit off, but I just want to talk about something I talked about last week, if that's okay. Is that about the church not mentioning this crime? Is that?
Well, actually,
save that.
No, I think I wanted to end with that. So let me. Did you want to say anything, Mindy, before
no.
I? Okay.
I'm looking forward to what she has to say about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So just to summarize, this was the main point of the presentation. We're going to come back to something we've already shared, but the question that I think we're posing to listeners and viewers, not to try and say we know for sure. We're all speculating. We're all doing our best to make sense of this. I think the case we've tried to make today is to highlight the degree to which there were Christian and Mormon elements that all informed and became kind of the foundation or the bedrock, albeit in a very conservative sort of offshoot or take that potentially made a lot of this possible. And it includes, from a Christianity standpoint, belief in God, belief in prayer, revelation, evil spirits, demonic possession, second coming of Jesus, an idea of heaven and the afterlife, prophets who speak for God, sexual shame, and even Jesus's teachings that following Jesus is more important than family. And then when you add to that the peculiar or the higher Mormon emphasis of a belief in personal revelation, a stronger emphasis in the second coming, which includes the prepper movement, which is heavily supported by the Mormon Church and conservative Mormons, the food storage stuff, the one mighty and strong, Davidic servant, the Mormon plan of salvation with past and future lives, the teachings about the veil, spiritual gifts on steroids, including objects with special powers, patriarchal blessings, lineage blessings, healing of the sick, women with spiritual powers. And then you add to that just a culture that de-emphasizes value of science, that de-emphasizes evidence and de-emphasizes critical thinking skills. You combine that with heavy sexual shame, a history of God-sanctioned polygamy, teachings about celestial sealings and eternal marriage, teachings about men and women becoming gods and goddesses, a bunch of Mormons, frankly, that are not feeling spiritually edified, that are bored at church, that are like looking at these prophets, seers, and revelators and saying, where's the beef? You talk with God and Jesus, and the best you can come up with are logo changes and, building more buildings and buildings and buildings. You've got these people spiritually hungry for something more. You've got this strong conservative and Republican culture, and that's neither here nor there to some degree. But then the last point where I think we need to bring you back on, Lauren, is literally in the first several pages of Mormon's most sacred scripture. And let's not pull any punches. To Mormons, the Book of Mormon is more sacred than the Bible, because the Bible is not necessarily translated correctly, but the Book of Mormon is translated literally by the gift and power of God to Joseph Smith. It's pure. It's literally, in Mormon theology, the most correct book on the face of the earth. When you add to that, one of the opening scenes in the Book of Mormon is Nephi lopping off the head of Laban. And I just grabbed a couple of photos there. Here's one photo of Nephi about to chop off Laban's head. This is every child. I was 5 years old learning this story of Nephi chopping off Laban's head. And it actually says cutting off his head. Like, you learn that as a young Mormon child, right? You've got Nephi here about to chop off Laban's head. You've got Nephi deliberating, do I chop off Laban's head when he's drunk? The gift and power of God. You've got light coming down as Nephi pulls the sword out, unsheathes the sword with an angel. Nephi's looking up. There's a light shining on Nephi's face. It's an angel telling Nephi to chop off Laban's head. And then here's Nephi saying, why, Lord, why? Why must I do this terrible thing? Well, I guess if you're commanding it, then, maybe I need to do it. We're kind of making the argument that there is responsibility on the Mormon Church to teach critical thinking skills, to disabuse members of the notion that if they get a thought or a feeling in their head that they think comes from God, well, that's got to be personal revelation. Not to mention just the possibility of the Mormon Church denouncing that story in the Book of Mormon, along with other stories in the Old and New Testament that sanction murder if God inspires you to do so. Is there some sort of culpability on the part of the Mormon Church to teach and educate its members better so that the Lafferty murders don't happen again, so that the Brian David Mitchell abduction doesn't happen again if he thinks he should abduct a woman and bring her into his polygamous cult? Just read Under the Banner of Heaven. Just read about Brian David Mitchell and Elizabeth Smart, and now read about Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow. What is the responsibility of Mormon church leaders in 2021? And I meant that as kind of a segue to your closing argument, Lauren. So please take that away. Oh,
no,
okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
Our last podcast is an interview with a woman named Dr. Christine. She's a convert to the church. She converted at age 18. Her parents didn't want her to convert, and she did. So she waited till she was 18, and she wanted to live this, she's, as she says, the good stuff. The families are forever, the marriage, the Mormon dream. And after some time in the church, she was manipulated by a false prophet and found herself, I mean, you'll have to listen to the whole episode, but she was sex trafficked. She was asked to adopt her children, to give her children away. She was in some need of some serious help and mental health. She was suicidal. She had nothing. And when she went to police in Utah, law enforcement, to tell them their story, they pretty much said there was nothing they could do because they don't deal with fringe movements. And she was in a fringe religion. And what they were dealing with wasn't sex trafficking or, you know, a victim. They were dealing with an offshoot, you know, cult type thing that wasn't really their, you know, that's not what they did. And so she was responsible. And I think that plays a good part into what you're saying is, do we need to address this more? This isn't, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow aren't their own thing. You know, this happens again and again and again. And do we need to take more ownership? You know, should those police officers have been able to say, let us help you? And it wasn't just police officers. She went to the church headquarters and told her story. And they said, oh yeah, we've been hearing a lot of warnings about this guy who she had met at a singles dance. She had just been divorced. And she thought, well, why did you let him into the dance? Why are you not telling people this? Why are you know, she said, I didn't know I was a convert. You know, he told me he had written the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon. You know, I believed in Joseph Smith. I believed in, you know, prophets. Why was I supposed to, you know, stop there? Because, you know, a lot of people thought she was dumb, you know, but she said, where do you draw the line? So like, where do these beliefs begin and end? And I think that plays a really important point into what you're saying is there's a lot of this, and there's a lot more of this now because of the internet too, and these beliefs. And I do think they need to take some responsibility, and we need to talk about it, and we need to take some ownership of Mormonism. And I say Mormonism, when I mean Mormonism, not just the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but Mormonism, as in all the offshoot groups, as in those wonderful women.
Warren Jeffs,
and the wonderful women who I got to know as a reporter in Hilldale and Colorado City. I got to know them. They're wonderful, you know, good people who are doing what they believe is right. And I think that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints needs to take more ownership of Mormonism, if that makes sense, and all of these offshoot groups and what they mean, because these beliefs it's a giant Venn diagram, right? And where do these people know where it ends and where it begins? So that's the first part of your question. And I think last week I brought up how Rexburg, the city of Rexburg, is struggling. This is a community that's 90% Mormon or LDS. It's where Eric Smith lived. It's where Chad Daybell lived. It's where the Preparing the People founders moved. It's where a lot of people are. And it's where a lot of the preppers are, and Avow's headquarters, where BYU Idaho is. And there is so much confusion there. People tell me they don't know who to talk to. They don't know who believes what. It's really confusing. And the church is not speaking out about it. They haven't mentioned Chad Daybell's name or Lori Vallow's name. And more importantly, they have not mentioned Tylee Ryan or JJ's name. And I specified Tylee, and the reason I did is JJ is 7. He wasn't yet baptized, a member of the church, and he was adopted. So I don't even know if he received a blessing. I don't know if he's a child of record. So the church can do all they want and, you know, dismiss JJ. I'm not saying they should, and that's cruel, but I'm just saying Tylee Ryan is a baptized member of the church. Her background on her Facebook page is a temple. This girl loved her church and her faith, and she was dedicated. And the church has not mentioned her name at all. And that makes me angry. You know, when Elizabeth Smart was missing, they did daily news conferences on church property to try to get her back. When Tylee Ryan went missing, mute, because the church didn't want to be associated with these crazy beliefs. That's why. You know, from a PR perspective, they didn't want to touch Chad Daybell's beliefs with a 10-foot pole. That's not us. But here is an LDS girl who's missing and who has no one, not even her family, because her mother's responsible for her death, and they're not saying anything. But in addition to that, Rexburg is suffering. These good people of Rexburg, they're such wonderful people. They're such righteous, you know, wanting to do what is right, have lived this their whole life, born in LDS, dedicated, service-oriented people, and they are so confused, and the church isn't saying anything. I brought up a story that Heather Daybell allowed me to share. Heather Daybell has become my close friend since this case. She is Chad Daybell's sister-in-law, lives right by Chad. She was Stake Relief Society president at the time. And when Dieter Uchtdorf came up, right after the children's bodies were found, she thought, finally, they're going to talk about our community crisis and my crisis. And they didn't say anything. All they did was talk about missionary work.
Stop this prepper nonsense. Stop the second coming nonsense. Stop the personal revelation nonsense. Stop all the foot zoning and the energy work nonsense. What an opportunity to say all this stuff, all this prepper garbage and spiritualism needs to end.
To give them direction, right. This needs to end. This isn't right. I heard from somebody else after I shared that story last week, a Rexburg resident. I've heard from quite a few. And she said, I remember when they visited, everyone was surprised. They came up unannounced, and we thought for sure they were there to talk about the Daybell situation. We thought for sure. She's like, now I think they were just trying to figure out what was going on there, but they met in secret with bishops, and they didn't say anything to us. But one of the most profound messages I've received about this crisis, and it is a crisis in Rexburg and throughout the prepper community, about where do these beliefs begin and where do they end? And the church isn't saying anything. I received a message from a grandmother in Rexburg, and it was long, but she has given me permission to read this particular part of the message without any identifying information. One thing I want to preface this too is she said that she's not, she's in Rexburg. She doesn't know anyone in the case, but when she talks to people in town, she doesn't know what parts of Chad Daybell's beliefs they believe. She said, I believe that half the people I run into maybe believe part of it, right? Whether it's part of the 2-tier or the tier 1, according to Eric Smith. She says, I'm not connected, but this is what I feel going out every day and talking to people in my ward. I don't understand. And she says this. So this is a woman, a grandmother in Rexburg. You spoke the truth when you said Rexburg, where I live, is hurting. I consider myself very balanced, with a strong testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ and a devoted love for the church. At least that was me before Chad Daybell. I have had and continue to have a crisis of faith. I too long for the church to step up and acknowledge that many of us are victims of Chad's teachings, and we need the brethren to address the elephant in the room, about which they have yet to even acknowledge. Their silence is deafening to many of us with heavy hearts concerning the bastardization that Chad Daybell imposed on so many things that were previously so sacred to us. Everything that I've embraced about the church is getting more and more sullied. I am not sure what I believe anymore. Now, here is the reason I'm reaching out to you, Lauren. Please do not let this matter go unexplored. The church is failing many of us who live in the midst of these evil teachings. We do not know who to trust with our conversations and beliefs anymore, and it hurts. Please do not let this get swept under the prayer rug. And I think that sums it up. Like this, when we set out to cover this case and discover the hidden motives, we had no idea, the layers of the onion we would, unpeel and where it would lead us. But I think one thing that I feel I need to tackle as a returned missionary and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the church does need to step up. People are hurting. And I really, really hope that they mention these children's names. These were not the perpetrators. They didn't believe those wild beliefs that their murderers believed, but they went to church. They're the church, they were members of the church, and they need us. And this should be about the victims. And there are so many victims. Tylee and JJ are, the most horrendous victims, but the entire city of Rexburg and this entire prepper movement is in deep need of guidance and for the brethren to step up. And I want to say that.
Beautiful.
Very well said, Lauren. Thank you.
And it's just Robbie says, and Charles and Tammy too are victims, right?
Charles and Tammy too. I bring the children up specifically because I feel like they had, no one to speak for them. The children are the most innocent of all the victims because they couldn't have even ran away. They were killed by those that were supposed to protect them. But Tammy Daybell and Charles Vallow too, and anyone else that is their victim we don't know about.
Yeah.
Well, I have a final thing I want to say, but Dr. John, Lauren, that was beautiful too. Thank you so much. Both Lauren and Dr. John, your summations are just so powerful and so beautiful. Any final words from you guys about this? And then we're going to plug your stuff after I make a closing comment. Then we'll have Mindy, and then I'll make a closing comment. Anything else, Dr. John or Lauren?
I think I'm good. Like
Okay.
to just hear from you, John.
Mindy, you want to have a final thing before I say one final thing, and then we'll plug their stuff?
I think what Lauren has said is a good ending.
Okay, beautiful. Well, I'll just say that, just this morning I got a link from a woman named Jamie Hepworth, who read a letter to Elder Nelson. She comes across as a believing Mormon, and she talks about how, not to mix issues, but she just talks about how, the vaccine is evil and the vaccine is super bad, the COVID-19 vaccine, and how personal revelation sort of dictates that. And she self-identifies as a prepper here. And I just want to sort of extend what you're saying, Lauren. There's a really big problem here within the Mormon church. The church is already hemorrhaging on the left with people who learn about the history, who are maybe a little bit more learned about the church history, maybe who are more sensitive to social justice issues like women's issues and LGBT issues. There's obviously a mass exodus going on in the church on the left-hand side. And what the church is also experiencing is this growing, with the Bundys and the prepper movement, this growing prepper movement on the right of people not feeling edified. And if ever we needed prophets, seers, and revelators to step up, along with the lack of people willing to even get vaccinated in the state of Utah and all the deaths that are occurring in Utah, Arizona, and Idaho that are led by Orthodox believing Mormons or ultra Orthodox believing Mormons. I just want to echo what you said, Lauren, that there is a significant problem. We need Mormon church leaders to step up. They can end this. They can make it really clear what's wrong, what's outside the bounds, and clean up this mess that Joseph Smith started, frankly. And so I just want to echo what you said, Lauren, and just say, please, Mormon church leaders, you've got a pulpit this weekend, a general conference coming up. You're going to be speaking to the entire membership. What an amazing opportunity to address this growing prepper movement and shut it down before there are more deaths and before there's more people dying of not being vaccinated, or these unhealthy beliefs that are they're breaking up families and are leading to all sorts of unhealthy outcomes. Please, Mormon church leaders, please stop this. Okay, that's my final plea, and people can decide if we made a decent case or not. The way that I wanted to end, Dr. John and Lauren, is for you guys plugging the heck, because I want to say, Dr. John, your psychological insight is so powerful and valuable.
Absolutely.
And Lauren, your journalistic skills and determination and doggedness, there are just, what a powerful 1-2 punch. You guys are doing amazing work. We're so grateful for your amazing work. Mindy, you gotta feel similarly. I know you've been following this really closely.
I feel like I've just been gushing about these guys. To anyone that will listen to me, it's just, you guys know I'm a huge fan, but I cannot recommend their content enough. I mean, I'm excited to see where their venture will go. I mean, it's been really fascinating to see them cover the Daybell Vallow case, but they've also done a lot of really interesting stuff, kind of talking about Gabby Petito and some other crime cases. So I think they are a dynamic duo, and I'm excited to see. I'm glad that they're getting exposure, and I'm excited to see where they go. We were one of the we knew them at the beginning before they got
before you guys are world famous stars.
Thank you, Mindy. We still need your show notes.
I'll send them.
Yeah, and Mindy, you've been amazing.
Thank you, John. This has been a pleasure.
It was fun to hear our expert guests sometimes defer to you for your expertise. So
I don't know about that, but
we hope you'll come back.
I would love to.
Yeah.
It's hard to say it's been fun because it's so sad to talk about, such deep topics, but I do enjoy hearing different perspectives, and I'm just so grateful that other people have such knowledge in different areas, and that enriches me and helps me to learn more and gets me curious to study more. So thank you.
So plug the heck out of your stuff, guys.
I just want to say, I'll let Lauren do that, but I just want to say thank you too. It's been a real honor to be on here and to be invited on here. And we have such respect for your work, John. So thank you for having us. And, we're doing our best to, I think it's a different world to us, or especially me, maybe not Lauren so much as a reporter, but our goal is to really, try to make a difference. And sometimes on YouTube, that's a tricky thing because there's such sensationalism out there, but we hope to stay the course and provide some illumination and education and insight if we can. And we're really honored to be able to do that. So hopefully we can make a difference in the true crime community and here today. So thanks again.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Our podcast is Hidden, a true crime podcast, and it's found everywhere: Spotify, Google, Apple. And we appreciate the reviews we've received, especially since appearing last week on Mormon Stories. They mean a lot. You know how much those mean, John DeLynn. And so you can get those podcasts anywhere you get your podcasts. Hidden, a true crime podcast. And then we started a YouTube channel after our podcast where we have a lot of those interviews that you've played. It's Hidden True Crime, in addition to some things on the Gabby Petito case that we've been discussing. We really wanted to bring the focus to domestic violence. And Dr. John has worked a lot with the, domestic violence victims, and feels we really wanted to jump on the Gabby Petito case just to bring awareness to that. And we're working right now on getting some of the interviews you showed tonight onto our podcast. And we have a few more, I think 4 more episodes outlined on the Daybell case that will be coming. And then we have season 2 in the makes as well. So that's what we're doing. And we appreciate the support. Like you, John, we're donation based right now. Hopefully one day we get a sponsor, but we have a Patreon account as well with some episodes with Dr. John and an Ask Dr. John series on our Patreon account as well for those that help us and support us.
Yeah,
right there. Yes.
So there's your Patreon account, Hidden True Crime, and we need more people signing up for the behind the scenes premium content, right?
Exactly.
Table, and they'll just like turn a phone on and record, and just listening to them chat just organically. It's been some of my favorite content. It's cool.
Thank you, Mindy.
Really good chemistry. You're welcome.
So people can donate to you by supporting your Patreon. Is that the main way?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. And it's affordable. So please support these guys with your support, everybody, with your links, with your subscribes, with your follows, telling other people, word of mouth, and by signing up on Patreon.
Thank you.
And if they want to give you guys tips or clues, how do they reach you?
hiddentruecrime@gmail.com. Thank you for saying that. We started this out. It's been an adventure. We always say, it's a developing podcast because of the tips and the sources that we get. And if you have something to tell us, we welcome it. And our email is hiddentruecrime@gmail.com.
And our website will be coming soon, and we'll have a contact form where people can send us tips or information or let us know if they want to talk.
I love
That's
it.
great.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been so fabulous. Thank you, Mindy.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. John and Lauren. Thanks to all our listeners and viewers. We had amazing comments. If you guys want to watch the live stream back, you can see the comments as they come in. And
Okay.
it's super fun. Yeah. No, but you guys as well as listeners, people that are joining us. So thanks to all you who support Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation. Your donations make this possible. So if you are a donor to the Open Stories Foundation or Mormon Stories, thank you. Thanks to everyone who donates to the Super Chat feature on YouTube. And if you're not a donor yet, you can literally go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor. And we'll do this for as long as you guys support us. And our money goes to support Kara and Gerardo and Brooklyn and all the equipment and bandwidth and editing and all the things you see. That's where your support goes. So please support us if you can. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please come back again and stay in touch.
Okay.
We will.
Thank
We
you.
will.
We'd love to.
And Mormon church leaders, you may not feel responsible for what's happened, but you can end a lot of what's happening by teaching your members better critical thinking skills and to teach them that these types of actions and beliefs and behaviors are unacceptable. So systems, not people. Mormon church, please teach your members to stop these types of behaviors and cut off this damaging wing of Mormonism, frankly, before more people pass away. Love you guys. Thanks so much. Stay in touch, and we'll see you guys again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories podcast.
We'll do.
Sounds
Bye-bye.
good. Take care.